we now have item number 5, which is a public hearing, and just for the members of the public who are unaware of how we conduct public hearings, typically we start by opening the public hearing. There's a staff presentation, then the applicant has a presentation, then the commissioners ask clarifying questions. That's basically if there's something in the staff report or the oral presentation that the commissioners are uncertain about or that's unclear, that's their opportunity to ask staff and the applicant questions about that. Then we receive public comments. We will also have the ability of the applicant to respond to any of those public comments as a matter of due process if they wish. We close the public hearing, then the commission has its deliberations, and then we vote on the motions that we have before us. So that's the process that we use. What I'd like to point out tonight, and I think it's important to say this because of the great variety and diversity of comments that we received in writing, is to clarify that the substance of this public hearing tonight and the staff recommendations that are on our agenda are strictly confined to the applicant's revised project proposal. This project goes all the way back to 2016, and I can get into more of the history of it later if anyone's interested, but we're now in the 7th year of this project. The mall owner, Brixmor Property Group, is solely focused on demolishing and replacing the outdated 57-year-old mall with a new commercial, retail, and dining venue. Those actions are entirely consistent with the general plan and land use designation and zoning for the site. We have just a few decisions before us tonight. One is conducting design review, approving the planning application, looking at the EIR consistency analysis, the CEQA mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and adopting findings and conditions of approval. There really are no other actions that we're being asked to take tonight or expected of us. So with that, I'd like to, again, wrap the gavel, start the public hearing.
Chairman Rowe, may I?
I forgot an important thing here.
Yes. I need to recuse myself from this matter. I live within 1,000 feet, and so the last time this came up 3+ years ago, that was also the case. So I'll step out of the room until you finish this item.
We will miss you, Mr. Streeter, but that means tonight that our alternate, Ms. Dios, will be voting. So, Eric, are you ready to start your presentation on this project?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Rowe. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back in person with everyone, and we're excited to bring this project to you. As you said, it's a long time coming in many ways, and the Planning Commission does have some history on it as it had come through before in the sort of initial concept. But yeah, I have a few slides tonight I want to present. I also have here on our team, the city team, is Nick Papani, our environmental consultant who prepared the consistency analysis, if the Planning Commission has any questions related to that or CEQA, and also Greg Behrens from Fair and Peers, who is a transportation consultant and kind of looked at that piece of the environmental part of it for this project, as well as the original. But for the most part, it's only if you guys have questions that it gets more technical, but we have them here if you wish. The project, as you said, is at University Mall. I think people are pretty familiar with the site, but it's just good to show this aerial vicinity map. It's about 8 acres in size. It includes the large enclosed mall itself, which was built in about 1966 with numerous additions and changes and renovations over the decades. And then the Trader Joe's building, which is much more recent. And then there's the parking and other areas around the site. The Arco station on the corner is not part of the site, not part of the project, and that's untouched and that's remaining. And then, of course, surrounding it is numerous apartment buildings and other residential areas, as well as the UC Davis campus to the south. And it is ringed by 3 arterial roads: the Russell Boulevard, Anderson Road, and Sycamore Lane. As you mentioned, this project was originally approved in 2020 for the University Commons project. At that time, it was just the concept, which was the general plan, the rezone. There was a demolition approval for the mall, but not any specific site layout or design. But as part of it, they do provide drawings and exhibits to show what their concept is, what they're thinking, and these are 2 exhibits from that project. And the lower one, of course, is the site plan. It shows the proposed kind of concept of the site plan, which similar to what is there now, generally in that you got the mall is one of the major major portion is to the rear. You've got some parking in the front. The Trader Joe's building would remain, and there would also be two new freestanding retail pad buildings towards the front. Obviously, the bigger piece of this is that there was a residential portion for the mixed-use project. So in terms of square footage, kind of the total amount of retail square footage, the maximum amount would be 136,800 square feet of new retail, plus the Trader Joe's. There's a large parking structure associated with it, and 264 apartment units. The cross section above it shows that with the retail in front, with the parking structure behind it, and then the residential levels above. And that's generally how it would be. So it would be, several stories, multi-story, larger, more square footage. And EIR was prepared for that project. There were mitigation measures, and there were findings related to that. The proposed project, as you mentioned, is retail only. That is different from what was initially considered and thought, but as mentioned in the staff report, the applicant was unsuccessful in being able to find a residential developer to do that portion of the project. They wanted to move forward, and they've submitted this proposal, which is, as I said, retail only, but otherwise it's certainly consistent with the general plan that exists on the site, consistent with the zoning, which even though it's mixed use allows for residential and retail. It could be mixed, but it doesn't require that it be mixed. The site layout is substantially similar to what had been reviewed before. Certainly, it would demolish the existing mall. It would retain the existing Trader Joe's. The main center of the mall would be located towards the rear. There would be no structured parking, so the parking is all on the surface, and that's focused on the front and on the side streets, as well as a little bit in the back. It is pulled to the south a little bit, so there's more space behind the building for access, for the circulation, for some of the parking, as well as for the delivery trucks and loading docks that are located back there. And of course, it also includes the two new buildings in the front for some additional tenants. But again, there's no residential. The construction would be phased in stages, and 3 stages, with the first phase being the parking lot next to Trader Joe's, and then so that Trader Joe's would remain open throughout construction. And once that's done, then the remainder of the site would be remodeled or redeveloped, demolished and rebuilt. And then the final phase would be the exterior improvements to Trader Joe's. So right now, that building has kind of an interesting, as eclectic mix of materials, and with the new buildings that are being constructed, the Trader Joe's would be redone on the outside to be more consistent with what the the new mall would be. I won't go into detail on this. It's pretty small, but this information is also in the staff report. It is a table of the proposed retail spaces, the tenant spaces, their sizes, and generally what the uses are expected to be. There are a mix of uses that are allowed on the site, but the site has been a neighbored commercial site. It served the community, can serve the local neighbored needs, and it also allows for offices, those types of uses, but for this proposal, it's primarily, again, that neighbored retail, community retail type use. It includes several junior anchor and anchor spaces, those larger ones, as well as a multiple of smaller tenant spaces for restaurant, food-related uses, as well as smaller retail uses. The exhibit on the lower left is just more for your reference, so you can see again what the site plan is generally like. The anchor spaces are towards the rear in the main building, of course. There's a central courtyard area with some smaller tenant spaces, I think 1 through 8, I believe, 1 through 7. And then the 2 smaller buildings in the front, which have 4 and 3 tenant spaces each. And those smaller spaces range from about 1,000 square feet to about 3,500 square feet for the most part. And again, those uses are allowed under the zoning. That's not up for the planning commission. As you said, we're focused on the design review and the final plan development, which is the site layout. The project does have a number of improvements. Although it's keeping the access and driveway locations, except for a few adjustments. Primarily, it's to improve the circulation, improve the flow, widening some of the aisles, straightening some of the aisles from what they currently exist as. It closes off one of the access points from the ARCO station to the site on the east side, so where the new one of the new smaller building is located. But there would still be access between ARCO and this site on the north side. And then there would be the middle driveway on Anderson Road would also be removed, and that allows for a little more parking as well as less conflict and interference on that side. There are a number of bicycle and pedestrian and transportation or transit-related improvements. Some existing bus stops would be upgraded and improved, bus shelters added, existing bike lanes would be refreshed, and then on Russell Boulevard, the protected bike lane would be added. And there's an exhibit in the staff report that shows the concept that's provided for, shown for that. And a lot of those elements are addressed already in the mitigation measures from the EIR and are being carried over, but they're just being clarified and been identified what this particular project needs to comply with. The project is also providing a number of gathering areas, patios and plaza spaces, both the common area, like the larger space in the middle, as well as patio spaces related to the tenants for outdoor eating and gathering. The pedestrian walkway that exists through the middle of the site would generally remain. I think it's a slightly different location, but there's a wide separated walkway that would be provided to connect the site together. Of course, the project will comply with the development standards for the site for height, setbacks, bicycle parking, vehicle parking, and other related zoning standards. I did want to make one clarification about EV parking. In my staff report, I mentioned that there are 75 EV parking spaces. Actually, there will be 15 EV parking spaces installed, but there will be capacity for 75 to meet the REACH code and the Cal Green. So they're not 75 EV spaces initially provided. On the back side, I also would want to just point out that there will be a sound wall, and that's required in the EIR because of the loading docks and the city's noise requirements. And that would be an 8-foot sound wall. There will be openings in it to allow for pedestrian passage from this site to the apartments to the north, but there will be a sound wall up there. The design of the buildings are very contemporary. They're more modern. They're one-story buildings, of course, as a retail project. This view is a view of the site from Russell Boulevard. So you can see the Trader Joe's building on the left, kind of the larger center in the back, and then a couple of the smaller pad buildings in the front. It's a little hard to see because it's so small, but I just wanted to give the overall visual of that. I have a couple more slides just showing a little more detail of it. In this one, it is the kind of front view of the main center. So not in the courtyard, but kind of view looking across the courtyard or facing it, looking at it, you would see these are the views. And so there's a lot of depth. There's a lot of articulation, different treatments, awnings, weather coverings, and murals that are being proposed as well. Sorry. And then this is one of the freestanding buildings. This is the one in the center facing Russell Boulevard. There'd be 3 tenant spaces. They would include a couple patio spaces associated with it for those food-related establishments. And I mentioned that this was the walkway that's attached to it that goes to the main part of it. And then also Trader Joe's, as I said, is being the exterior is being redone, and it would be more modern, more contemporary to be consistent. The colors would be slightly adjusted to, again, be compatible with the rest of the site. One of the issues is, of course, tree removal. The site has a lot of trees. They're in various states of health. There's an arborist report that has been provided with the project. A number of the trees were recommended to be removed because of the health or the condition. Others were in better health, but many of them need to be removed for the project to be developed, which is being redone. So This is the tree removal exhibit. The arborist report identified 93 trees of significance or protected trees under our city ordinance, and 22 trees that were smaller and unprotected under our city ordinance on the site. Of those, 9 of them would only remain based on this exhibit, and there were additional 27 trees in the project vicinity that the arborist had identified. And the sound wall, it is expected that sound wall, unfortunately, would probably affect some of those additional trees. I mentioned the environmental review, so all projects are subject to CEQA, or at least need to be evaluated to see if they fall into CEQA and need additional review. As I mentioned, an EIR was previously prepared for the University Commons project, and what we did for this is to determine, do we need to do additional environmental review? Do we need additional documents? And so we prepared a detailed environmental consistency analysis checklist, which looked at this proposal and the University Commons project, as well as that EIR, to see, does this fall within that scope in the analysis? And it determined that it was consistent with that EIR, it is within the scope, and that basically, there are no new impacts, no more severe impacts, or new mitigation measures that would trigger additional analysis and review. And so that project is consistent and would be covered by the EIR that was previously prepared, and that no additional environmental review is required. We did look at the mitigation measures just to identify which mitigation measures would apply to this portion of the project, because of course the University Commons project was larger, it included residential, and we needed to identify what this applicant for this project would need to comply with. And so there's a updated mitigation monitoring reporting plan that's included with your staff report that identifies those mitigation measures. And there's some clarifications, but no significant changes. There's also a development agreement that was done as part of the original project. This project does not amend it, does not change it, but of course we looked at it to see what applied, because there are requirements that apply to this project. And if residential is proposed, if like the full project were proposed and developed, then the additional requirements would apply. And that's summarized in the staff report, but it's these exhibits, C, E, F, H, I, and J, that address impact fees. There's sort of a local hiring requirement, some of the sustainability commitments, as well as the transportation improvements, which are the mitigation measures, but they're also included in the development agreement. And then there's Exhibit J, which is landscaping and water conservation, which address the tree planting and tree mitigation, the tree monitoring. So there are additional requirements for that I can pull up for you if you would like to see. And these are the exhibits or portions of which would apply to this project because it is redeveloping the site. There is the retail portion, and so the applicant will need to comply with these. For public comments, we received a number. They're either attached to the staff report or I forwarded the ones I've received. Generally, there were a number that talked about the desire for the city, for the need for residential on the site, because of the city's housing needs and climate change. But as you said, we are looking at really the design and the final plan development. It's not the uses. This retail use is permitted under the zoning. And there were some comments in support of the retail project and the uses. And then finally, we just received a comment letter from the DDBA, which I've provided to you. I think you received it a little bit late in case you did not have a chance to read it. It is consistent with what I was told and what I've summarized in the staff report about the applicant's meeting with the DDBA and what the DDBA kind of asked about and what some of their comments were. They were interested to know what some of the specific tenants would be, and the applicant was not able to disclose that. They have, of course, some concerns about how the two sites or the downtown and the mall will interact, kind of a desire for some coordination on promotions, things like that. We do have a condition recommended in this part of this project for the applicant to at least allow and work with the DDBA on allowing them to use the kiosks or public information areas for promotions, and the applicant has agreed to that. That was something the DDBA had raised and was interested in. But further detail, I think the applicant may need to speak to if there's anything related to that. So finally, what staff is recommending is that the Planning Commission find that the project is consistent with the scope of the University Commons EIR, adopt the updated mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, and approve the final plan development and design review. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Just for clarification, Eric referred to the DDBA, that's the Downtown Davis Business Association, and we did all receive a copy of their letter right before this meeting started. With that, I'd like to go to the applicant presentation. Mr. Brown, are you doing that tonight?
I'm doing it.
Okay.
Eric, thanks so much. Can we put on the site plan if you get a chance? It's great to see you all in the same room again. It's been a long time, and I appreciate you taking the time to come out tonight. On behalf of our team, I'm very pleased to present our reinvestment of the University Mall for approval for the Plan Development and Design Review. Built in '66, as Eric said, we've had modifications through the years, and this is another step in our proposal. The demolition of 97,000 square feet and the addition of another 101 bring us to a total of 114,000 square feet. Our intent is to deliver a design that's contemporary, warm, and welcoming, and with materials and finishes that are more in keeping with today's retail environment. Our welcoming common areas will include pedestrian gathering areas, meandering walks, bike paths, and safe, convenient parking, which currently doesn't exist today. The overall project will include sustainable elements such as EV charging stations, rooftop solar, bike parking, water conservation, utility metering, all part of our DA as well. Pursuant to the approved and executed development agreement, the Davis Collection will also strive to hire locally, implement aggressive parking management plan, mitigate traffic impacts through off-site improvements. In order to deliver a safe and convenient customer experience, we will have to disturb 100% of the site. We have one-way traffic, we have a lot of undersized stalls, we have a lot of pedestrian crossings, which are not safe today. And this will obviously impact a lot of our trees, as Eric pointed out. Although in poor health, this will result in the replacement of our mature landscape with new landscaping. However, this will also provide us an opportunity to provide healthy, properly installed, and properly maintained landscaping in the future. Upon completion, operationally, we will implement an aggressive parking plan, which will be administered by an on-site Brixmor representative, which doesn't currently exist. Our on-site rep will actively partner with the Chamber of Commerce and the Davis Downtown Business Association. And lastly, we'll submit annual arborist reports to ensure that our new landscaping is maintained in a healthy manner. As you may be aware, our initial design concept was reviewed in 2017 with a mixed-use development application in 2018. And everybody's been asking, why retail, why now, after all that time? We received our approvals in late 2020, and during the COVID period. I think we had 103 comments at Planning Commission or Council, I think, in July of 2020. And it was all remote, so there was no chance to discuss what was going on in the industry and obviously in the economy. Over the past 2 years, we've been working with residential partners, but that we've had previously. Our number ones, our number threes, and our number fives all passed on the opportunity as they focused on primary markets. As you probably have read, project construction costs have gone up 30% annually over the last 2 years as we've had supply chain and labor disruption. And frankly, vertically integrated projects have lost favor with our tenant base. They're operationally challenged with what we do and how all of those uses come to the ground. All of this made us look at what to do with our asset after 6 years, nearly 7 years of working on it, and what do we need to do to reinvest in the community as our center continued to deteriorate. In late 2021, I contacted staff. We talked with many of the council members, and we really wanted to talk through what we could do in a reasonable way today. Our initial comment was that we know retail, our tenants are coming back, let's deliver a retail center. And staff spent a lot of time with us talking about how we could deliver a residential project and still have a mix of uses on this site. Frankly, for all the reasons I stated previously, we just couldn't get there, and it was either wait for another cycle or invest in this asset before it turned into a blighted condition, which frankly, as I was there today, it's almost, many parts of it are already that. Therefore, we pivoted, and we respectfully request your support for a retail development to create a memorable customer experience with new retail and restaurant offerings. I should note that this initial phase does not preclude residential in the future. We still have on-grade parking lots that can obviously be built. We're talking with our adjacent property owners, ARCO and the apartments, about possibly doing something in the future. We have 13 years left on our development agreement, which would allow us to do a mix of uses, but in a horizontal way, not in a vertically integrated way, which makes it much more cost-effective to deliver that project. However, given the prior notes, even with city support, residential could not be delivered, and we must move forward with retail. I'm proud that our project has been widely supported, and pleased the Davis community will benefit from new bus shelters, Russell Boulevard bike lane improvements, opportunities for local artist installations, and frankly, back to contributing city tax revenues of $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 annually. Time is now to take advantage of this opportunity. Our tenants are asking to be in your community once again. The economic cycle that we're in the middle of now, I fear we're at the end of, and time will change what the cost of money is and what the impact is to those economies. Therefore, I respectfully request the Commission's approval for our planning application, for the final plan development, and for the design review for the Davis Collection. I really appreciate your time, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much. What we'd like to do now is go to clarifying questions by our commissioners. Again, this is seeking clarification on anything about which they have a question, and either in terms of the presentations we've received tonight or the written materials. And I'd like to start at my far left with Commissioner Dios, if you would like to proceed.
I have to play with this. Sorry. Thank you for the opportunity to go first in the 3 years to speak here. And thank you for coming. Thank you for your presentation, Eric, very much. Thank you for the staff report and everything that you've given to us. Given us a lot to think about. And obviously we got some community engagement in this project, so that's wonderful to see as well. Tell me some more about, you can't tell us who these tenants are, and I understand that. How much room is there for local businesses to be at the restaurants or something else? Is there room for that here, or are they all taken at this point?
They're not all taken, and we very much would like to have a second unit from downtown. We had a long discussion with the Davis Downtown Business Association when I got a chance to talk with them on Zoom. There was concern about competition, and that's one of the reasons why we'd really like to co-market the properties, and that's what our on-site rep will be doing, is reaching out to them and the chamber. We have, I would say, of the spaces you see on there, we probably have 3 of the anchors that are fairly well committed, and 4 of the 15 shop spaces that are fairly well committed, so there's a lot of room for that. To have local businesses also be a part of it. We have a third-party broker as well as in-house brokerage that's been reaching out, and it's one of the things that we're going to continue to do through the. Keep in mind, this will be an 18-month construction project, so as it starts coming out of the ground, you really start to get new interest from new tenants that may not have looked at it, and that'll help us get through some of the economic disruption that we're in the middle of, and allow tenants to look at new opportunities at the same time. But we're very open to having that, and hopefully you'll have a good portion of it to be local.
And as far as the layout of it, I mean, I think of it as a U. Maybe I'm putting in the ARCO station as part of that. I'm just so concerned that we have a courtyard, and I'm just looking at, I'm not sure there, yeah. I mean, I see T4 and then T1, 2, 3, and T5, and so in that middle courtyard. It's a south facing, and I just anticipate, you've been here in our summers, perhaps.
I have.
Oh, yeah, you were here in July that year. Well, I guess that was Zoom.
Oh, that was Zoom.
That was Zoom.
Yeah.
But that's going to bake. I mean, what type of shade structure are you looking at in this?
Yeah, the architectural design has shade canopies over openings for glazing. I would anticipate that we will have umbrellas and shade structures as necessary as in what I'm calling flip-flop court. Therefore, it will have areas of shade and areas of sun. There's been discussion about putting misters, which frankly are not great. They're terrible when they don't work, and they're marginal when they do. They actually just create humidity more than they create any relief. But all of the anchor buildings actually have south exposure, and so they will all have canopies built into the architecture and those kind of things. It won't be a colonnade, but it'll certainly have coverings, intermittent coverings on the building within the building structures.
I'm just concerned with the changes in climate, and we're getting hotter and hotter and more extreme. If this is built for our future, this is a design that's more of our past.
Yeah, it's a good question. During COVID, one of the things we learned is people still want to engage and be social and interact, but they want to do it at a distance. So if you look at the sidewalks that are out there today and the disruption that's in the disarray that it is in, I mean, most of those sidewalks are 12, 15, and 18 feet wide, so you're able to get space. We'll definitely have soft textures and hard textures, so you're able to get some relief from just an asphalt parking lot. Obviously, we're replanting well over 100, I think it's 150 trees. So that'll help in the shade because many of the trees that are there now don't provide much shade at all. And as you get into the sidewalk areas, like I said, we will have, whether it's built into structure or amenities that are placed, we will definitely have intermittent shade opportunities.
And you mentioned EV parking and the change with that, Eric. Thank you. I wondered about that number. Is there going to be any type of charging stations here, not only for cars, but for bikes?
Yeah, that's a great question. We talked about that. Yes, it's something I hadn't even thought about till we talked on the phone. And I think it's absolutely something that we will do. We have, 65 bike parking stalls plus lockers. So there will definitely be outlets around those areas where we could charge bikes. The EV, the 75 is the total required per code, but there's no defined time of when that has to be enacted. That's a Gavin Newsom in the Cal Green Code. We have to have 20% of our total, which is 25% of the overall parking, has to be connected day one. So that's the only clarification. We'll have 15 EV charging stations day one. We'll have the capacity for 75, which will meet our requirements for the overall parking. But yes, we'll definitely have bike charging stations as well.
And then this question, I don't know if it's for you or for Eric or that. On the
We'll
impact,
give it to Sherry.
Sherry, or Sherry, I can send it to you. On the impact fees, tell me where that's structured. And that's just me being new to this, and I apologize.
The impact fees have been adopted by the City Council. Most of them are based on square footage or some other metric like that, and we calculate those at the time of building permit.
And is there any room to make any amendments on impact fees, or is that sailed?
No, you cannot. No, you cannot impact the impact fees without them going through a formal change.
Okay. I'm good for now, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Valencia.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, a few questions. So I'm going to go backwards here and ask a question that's probably not going to be very popular, but it's really more an effort to try and help those of us, people in the audience, the letters that were sent, to kind of come to terms, I guess, with the lack of housing in the project. I know that's kind of the thorn. When you were going through the decision-making process, and you offered some ideas already as to why you are where you are right now, maybe you could help us understand what things, had they been available to you, that you might have considered continuing with the housing.
So our company's a retail company, and I've been pretty open about partnering with a residential developer, which is what we're doing around the country. I think a question's been asked, or I've seen it printed, about how many residential projects do we have. We don't own any residential projects. We're not an operator. There are those that will do it well. We will figure out a way not to do it well. So we stick to what we know. So typically what we've done in our other projects is we've partnered with residential developers, and we've done a horizontal development where both uses come to the ground. In this case, we try to, because it's a very small site, most of our sites are 20, 30, we have an 80-acre site. Most of our sites are much larger, so we're able to carve off pieces of it, sell them off, or entitle them with a development partner, and they will go and build the residential. So for us, because we had such a small site, and in order to get the density, we had to stack. The previous program was to stack retail, parking, and residential in a vertical stack, which has some complexities to it. So when we were talking with developers, the only way we could get it to pencil when we were doing it internally on the analytical side was to have a certain number of beds, which when you put it with the certain number of rooms that we came in with is a different product than just straight up market rate residential. So we started to talk with market rate as well as student housing developers throughout the country in 2018 when we first started talking with staff. I think that was 17 or 16, even before that. I mean, when the initial plans first came out. So what we tried to do is figure out how to vertically stack 3 uses, because parking was a big piece of it. And it's not so much what the city would allow, but it's what the market requires, whether it's for retail parking or for residential parking from a marketability perspective. So by the time we got there, we had a certain number of units in a certain volume, and that's how we put together the analytical side of it. We get the approvals. COVID was not kind at the time. I mean, it was a tragedy for the world, but for the economics of living, everybody took a step back on how they wanted to live. And they didn't want to live in close proximity. They didn't want to live with 4 beds per bedroom, which I know the city wasn't in favor of either. But at the end of the day, you need a certain number of beds to underwrite the expense. And as pricing was going up and developer profits were going down because of occupancy and all those kind of things, the developers that we were talking with, the partners we were talking with at the time, just took a step back and say, we're going to focus only on primary markets and understand what that program is going to look like as we come out of COVID. I mean, we're 3 years into it, and we're still wearing masks. I wear masks on airplanes, right? So we're still dealing with the health tragedy, and the residential developers are still working through that in their program. So when we lost that opportunity to bring that second use into our development, we took a pause, 12, 15 months. And it wasn't really until November of 21 when we pulled this out and said, we've got to do something with this asset. World Market, I think, had just left about then, and our occupancy was somewhere around 28%. So that's tough to have a center that's deteriorating like that at 28% occupancy, and we decided to pursue a retail, and that's when we started engaging back with the staff and with the council members. And that's how we got to where we are tonight.
So if I would paraphrase, it sounds like timing was really the issue for you and perhaps, or your organization, perhaps if there were other resources that the city could offer, deferment of fees, things like that, that wasn't going to be enough or wouldn't be enough. And I know we're looking backwards.
Yeah.
It really is sincerely to get an idea for us as a community going forward, other things that we may need to think about, because you're the person that can kind of help us with some ideas on that.
No, I certainly appreciate that. I don't think there was anything that timing matters for sure. Matter of fact, we're having an operational huddle, as we're calling it, with 70 of our team members next week, and it's all about the importance of time and how time will kill deals, right? And in this case, we needed the residential market and the retail markets to really be simultaneously at a growth mode. And when we had residential, we were lacking the retail, and now we got the retail and we're lacking the residential. So we could either wait for the next cycle, whenever that might be, or we could move forward, and I made the decision to move forward. And that's how we got to a retail-only plan. So
just to make sure I'm on task with you then, really it was timing again.
Absolutely.
Okay. I appreciate your taking time to explain that.
You bet.
So I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. Currently, the property has some office square footage. I'm sure it's in the packet somewhere. I don't remember what the number is, the square footage. Was there or is there any consideration of doing office square footage in your project? And I believe it's all second floor also.
Today, it's second floor non-accessible because there's no elevator that goes up there. We haven't thought about office in this configuration. We do, in many of our shop tenant buildings around the country, we do have service-oriented, and we do have some office in that space, but it's typically second generation, not first generation space. You have a lot of office that's been built in the West Village and around the city that is still not fully occupied, so I don't know that you need a lot of office space. But from a service perspective, it's possible that we could have service tenants in there.
Okay, so it's a possible consideration.
From a use perspective, sure.
Okay. The other thing I would ask is, I'm sure you've done an analysis on the number of jobs that'll be created as a result of this project at build-out, we'll say at completion. Do you know what that
during
number is?
construction, there'll be about 150 construction jobs at any given time.
Right. I'm thinking more of the project itself.
So Trader Joe's averages 35 to 40 per shift. And the remainder of the center is probably from a employee personnel on site, it's somewhere around 250 to 300 a day.
Okay. So, and typically, and I'll ask, you're more the expert at this than I am, but what would you estimate those individuals, what their incomes would be?
Not in the retail business, I couldn't tell you.
I did a little bit of Googling, not that that's the end-all be-all on this, but I would estimate that they're probably anywhere from about $30,000 to $45,000 a year for the employees that are there. The point that I'm really getting at is we end up with jobs, which is great, but we end up with 300 people potentially working in the facility and yet again making money that, or I'll say an income that doesn't avail them of being able to rent anything in our community or buy anything in our community. So, and it's just a point I'm making. You can't solve it for us, but it's something that is an inherent issue for the community and a lot of other communities I'm sure you're doing projects in. So, okay. I think Commissioner Deos already kind of alluded to this, but I'll ask again. You currently have some tenants in your building that, I don't know all of them, but some of them seem to me very viable companies, organizations, businesses, and they're local, small entrepreneurs.
Yep.
Do they have any kind of, I'll call it, for lack of the proper term in commercial, I'll use residential term, kind of a first right of refusal for lease on tenant space when you have some finished product to offer them?
We are offering the opportunity to come back, yes.
So is that like an official offer, or how would that work?
Our leasing teams, so we have an internal and external leasing teams. They're talking with all of them about, right now they're all on temp leases. None of them have contractual leases. They're all month to month, depending on when we get started. And those that have expressed an interest, we're talking with them about a new lease with them.
Okay, that sounds promising. I think that's my question for you. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Please, it's Bill.
Thank you.
Just
Commissioner
Bill.
Essex?
The old microphone. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming. Appreciate that and your willingness to answer questions on this. It's been I know you've been here via Zoom before, and we're still trying to figure out how to get this shopping center upgraded. I believe every one of the comments that I've received via email and phone calls is we want a good shopping experience in our community, and I'm sure that you're determined to provide that. So,
We are. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I was wondering about the tenants. Where are the customers for these tenants? I know when tenants come into a new community, they do a survey to look at, who are their potential customers, and how far away are you drawing those customers from? And do you have access to any of those studies?
We don't have access to their studies. We do have the ability internally to do traffic reports. We do it based upon cell phone origination points. So yes, even if your cell phone's asleep, we can still tell you where you are, or companies can.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody already knew that, I'm sure. But we haven't done that for this center. The tenants are certainly they go by sales volumes on what they can afford to pay us in rent, which is great. So they have obviously talked about where their existing stores are and how far away they are. But I don't have that readily available, but we can get that for sure. We can share that with the staff, and they can give it to the commission.
That would be helpful. That would be helpful.
And I'm going to reach out to Trader Joe's. Obviously, they're the only constant that's there now, but if they have it, they'll get it to us as well.
Right, right. And I know Trader Joe's draws from a wide region. Yep. And which is why their parking is always difficult to get in. So this shopping center has felt to me in the 30 years I've seen the many changes, that it's mainly a neighborhood shopping center that draws a substantial amount of students from the university. And there's a tremendous amount of folks walking and biking in this community, in this neighborhood, because of that. And so I guess my question is, how are these customers, how do you anticipate them arriving? If they're regional anchors, they're drawing more people in cars, which people in the neighborhood really don't want. If they are arriving by bike and walking, then they're not causing a lot of traffic trouble, and this is a site that's perfectly aligned for that. But you don't really have that data for us tonight.
We don't. There's two users of our parking lot that shouldn't be in our parking lot. We have transient parking, which is resident parking that's long-term. We have commuter parking, where students will come and park and walk across the street. All of that is a deterrent to our customer parking. So by putting a property manager representative on site, that will be one of their key roles, is to make sure that customer parking is available. We are just barely above parking code. We will have an active employee parking requirement, which today doesn't exist. Today, there's no parking along the rear property line, so we're adding 50 stalls along the back, which will all be employee parking. That'll be their designated area. It'll also be some of the EV stations, honestly, as well. So all of that should make better parking demand available for you. And also today, frankly, the parking stalls, the way they're laid out and undersized, there's many times when one car is in two stalls. So it's one of the reasons why I think a two-way traffic 90-degree parking, more typical parking lot is better functionally from a usage perspective. And obviously they'll be per today's code, so they'll be 8.5 or 9 by 18 feet instead of 6 by 14 or whatever those angled parking stalls are. So I think the configuration of it will also allow additional parking in those areas.
Okay, I didn't notice whether you're providing more parking or
It's actually less parking.
less parking.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Weiss?
All right, thank you. Can you hear through this mask?
We
Good.
can.
Okay, I was just going to ask that. Could we clarify on the parking spaces? I know we've got the 328, but what is it today versus tomorrow?
Yeah, today it's around 1 per 310, and we're going to 1 per 345-ish. So we're losing about 10% of the overall stalls.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't see anywhere from this to this, so like making me a little crazy.
It's on one of our plans, but I don't think it's in the exhibits of what we provided. But I can certainly get that to you as well.
No
if you
worries.
like.
Just the verbal articulation was enough. It just when I was looking, we have a lot of exhibits to go through. Thank you so much for speaking so frankly about the economics and the market conditions. I really appreciated the way that you approached that. Rooftop solar, I heard. Parking lot solar, no.
Not in the front. We're talking with our EV charging stations about putting solar canopies above them, so we can charge them not from the grid, but from solar. We're still working with the providers on that.
Your partner, yeah, the partner for putting the charger in. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, got it.
But storefronts, I'm not going to get a Kaiser parking lot in the front of this where they all have canopy
Got it.
solar.
Okay, just asking for a friend. Dog park. I saw something about a dog park, and I was very confused. What is the dog park? Where is the dog park?
So the dog park's in the back. If you go to Flip Flop Court and go upper right, we're providing an area for pet relief that's towards the back of that courtyard.
Okay. So it's a...
People shop with dogs.
No, it's fine. It's just not a dog park like I'm thinking of dogs roaming free
it's
on
not,
an acre of land.
It's not where you have
I'm
happy
thinking-
hour with dogs. Yeah, it's really a relief area.
A relief area. Okay,
Yeah.
yes, nicely said. I saw the mural idea. Is there any other art that's going to be in there?
So in the elevations that you see in your packets, there are art depictions in different areas, and the thought is that we will engage with local artists and Sherry has asked me to talk with I'm going to get the title wrong. Rachel.
Yeah.
City Arts. Civic
City
Arts.
Civics Arts Manager.
Yes. So we're going to, in many of our centers, we want the local community to engage with the center as well, and we're putting art installations, or whether it's sculpture or paintings or some sort of art, but we've just shown them as placeholders in our elevations for now. That's not what the picture is going to look like. We're going to go out to the local
Right.
community and have ideas of what it could
Wonderful. Okay. I thought there was more opportunity than just the mural. Wonderful.
Correct.
Okay. I want to make sure I don't ask what other people have asked. You can still make a left-hand turn onto Anderson, yeah?
You can make a left-hand turn onto Anderson from the service drive only. That's why we're closing that middle drive. Right now, the island goes down that far. So you can't come out of Arco, you can't come out of our first drive, you can barely come out of the second drive because of the turn lane. You have to go to the service drive, which is the furthest north drive.
Okay, to go that way. Okay,
To
by
turn left across.
The Chinese Christian church. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So
Good.
you can still do that.
You can still do that.
Yes.
Asking for a friend. So, someone who lives north of there. This might be for the city, and I know, and I guess you said Mr. Behrens was here, that we had recently a very bad incident with a young girl on a bicycle as someone was coming out of the Trader Joe's lot making a right onto Russell. And I know we've got a lot of improvements there. I just wondered, do we feel really good about the mitigation measures on safety on Russell? Because this was not the first horror show to happen. It's just one that, happened to know who the little girl is. So it's quite, just maybe we could have Mr. Barron speak to some of the mitigation measures, the safety measures.
We had a call with Public Works, if I may, and we're adding the bike lane between the right-of-way on Russell from Anderson to Sycamore. So there'll be a dedicated bike lane, striped, painted. I think it's striped and painted, right?
Yeah, and I would say the mitigation measures don't necessarily address the bike lanes right against other than Russell Boulevard. They don't address the bike lanes necessarily like at the driveways so much as at the intersections because of the conflicts with bikes and peds and vehicles. Mm-hmm. But there are existing bike lanes, and they will be refreshed, and they will have the new paint, that high visibility paint, the green paint, like at the driveway entrances, things like that. And the driveways themselves would be textured, and there'll be some kind of textured concrete like that to just delineate them more and differentiate. But those are our busy areas.
Yeah, no, it's
So we're enhancing Sycamore and Anderson, and we're installing on Russell. So we'll have a connection around the block.
Yeah, it can be a bit scary. How consistent, maybe this is city, is this with this whole Reimagine Russell and all of that? I mean, does this fit well?
Yeah, so the concept for Russell Boulevard and reimagine Russell Boulevard at this section from, I think was it A Street or wherever to 113 was for a protected bike lane. And that's what is being proposed and would be done. We had discussions about a multi-use path off the street, and certainly there are advantages to that, but there just was difficulty with the trees, with the right-of-way, with it being non-connected to anything else other than, so it would be by itself. And so for bicycles, for the through bicycles, the bike lane on Russell Boulevard is, what had been settled on for the Russell Boulevard corridor plan.
Okay. Today, I often see a lot of buses parked in that lot. Usually, it appears to be visiting sports teams that are competing with UC Davis. I'm assuming in the future there will not be a large area for buses to park.
Correct.
Are we, so to the city, I'm assuming we're going to have a little chat with UC Davis about the bus things going away? I mean, I'm assuming they have enough parking for those buses and it's merely the bus drivers wanting to park there?
That's not something we would normally do. I would think that in all likelihood, what would probably happen is his property manager would
shoo them
have
away.
a conversation with them.
I'm just pointing out because this is amongst the other uses you have for your parking lot, I often see lots of that going on there. And I'm
Plus,
thinking,
you already gave them permission to do it.
We certainly did not.
Okay.
yeah,
But with 28% occupied, it
you're
doesn't
like,
surprise
whatever.
me. It doesn't
Yeah.
surprise me that there's buses there. We've actually had squatter food trucks there at times when Sherry says, "What are you doing to me?" And I said, "I have no idea.
I
We'll
didn't
find out."
give them permission yet. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
All right. And then my last question is really around the Phase 2 construction, which is obviously the big kahuna, right? That's really where you're doing most of the
Right.
construction. And Trader Joe's is still going to be open. And can we get that picture up? I think it's on page 88 of 134. There's the picture of what it's going to look like during then. And this construction project is a big construction project, so it's not like you can just do this in the summer when there aren't as many people here.
Correct.
So I don't know what's specified in the development agreement because I know you have a lot of specifications about construction and what's going to be going on.
Yeah, this has been refined a little bit. So the access to Russell will be as shown here. We'll have an access to Sycamore, obviously, as shown here. We actually have pedestrian fencing, and from the phasing of it's a little bit different. That parking lot will be first. So we'll do that parking lot that's shown non-hatched. This
Right.
shows phase 2. That's the fenced area for there you go. Even though that's a little bit different because this will allow us to park the entire site while we're doing that small parking lot. Take that parking lot and put it in. And if you think about that parking lot will now be 3 trays instead of 2.5 trays of angled. So you'll have a few more parking stalls than what you currently have, but you'll have access to Sycamore and Russell, which is what Trader Joe's is requiring during construction. I've done an office building in San Francisco. This is so much better than that.
I just wondered experiences
Yeah.
with keeping something open while you're doing, particularly something as popular as Trader Joe's is, and already, even though no one wants to park in those.
Yeah, we were
spots.
talking about this today. My filter is if my daughter and wife don't feel safe and comfortable going there, then we have failed. And so that's the filter that I use whenever we walk on sites that are under construction to make sure. So this will evolve as we go through it, but this is the diagram of how we anticipate doing it. And then once we get on site with the contractors, we'll figure out path of travels and access and all those things that matter. And we have a pretty significant signage program, too, to keep people moving safely through the site.
Yeah, so I wondered to the city, this is a clarifying question, is it okay to really ask the Brixmor team to really make sure that they've got the traffic and the safety monitors and all that during that time to really specify that? I'm just quite concerned about what things are going to be like there, given the popularity of the store.
Sure. We already have a condition of approval that we always put on projects that talks about traffic, or the operations of traffic during construction. This one is just complicated
It's
by
complicated,
the fact
right,
that there's actually a store that's open while the rest of the whole site is under construction. But I think we can do that, and it certainly behooves the applicant to make sure that people are safe and can move around safely. It's certainly not in their best interest to have it be kind of confusing and tough to figure out.
Yeah, okay.
The only difference we've done, if I may, on this is we've pulled the fence line that's along the future pedestrian walk from Russell into the center. We pulled that fence line back to give another half tray of parking, so it creates better circulation. The best part about this is you never have to access Russell at all during construction. It's all going to be coming in the rear service drives now, so that's where truck traffic will be, and it'll be away from the front of the center. So we can pretty much isolate the construction site with this plan.
For TJ's loading dock too?
Excuse me?
The Trader Joe's loading dock as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. That's it for me.
You
Thanks.
bet. Thank you.
Commissioner Rutherford.
Well, thank you, Chair Rowe and fellow commissioners. It's great questions. I guess what comes to my mind again is like the Davis Collection of Missed Opportunities, I think is the name that I'm going to need to call this. I'm really disappointed, as I think a lot of people may know, that residential isn't a part of this. I was very critical over the what you were proposing for residential, and we don't need rent by the beds. I don't understand how a project like this still can't be feasibly done without multifamily housing as part of a project. Talk about some of the constraints. I've seen other developments around, even some that are being proposed down in Modesto, that are 100% affordable and going to have commercial parking and stacked housing on it. It's really hard for me to buy into this. I'd really hope that maybe you might want to take a minute and take a huge step back and think about this, and can we pause and rethink? I know where you're at and I know what you're saying. We as a community are, I think, really torn on this, as you've seen, probably have heard. What's the possibility of just pausing and saying, you know, and can we do this differently? I mean, you have a commissioner sitting right here who'd be more than willing to help with figuring out a different, community outreach plan and thinking this through differently. I've said this to developers all the time. I'm willing to do this. I've built a profession on trying to do this.
I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the question. To think that we didn't reflect on how we could do it differently over the last 2 years would be, I don't think, an accurate statement. We've looked at it a lot of different ways, and as I said, we're not residential developers, so we have to find the appropriate partners. I don't know the business structure of what's going on in Modesto, or how they're subsidized, or how they take tax abatements for subsidies, or whatever the case may be. I have no idea what that business structure is. All I know is from our perspective and how we invest in properties, we need a partner alongside, and we've been unable to find that partner. And therefore, we've chosen to move on instead of letting our center deteriorate further.
Well, I can appreciate that, and I guess I've got other comments that I'm going to hold off on to later. I just try to keep my questions with you here. Can you go a little bit more details in regard to your local hiring program? And I'm not sure if I missed something, Exhibit E.
Yeah, in the development agreement, there one of the requirements, and it's been fairly standard in the last however many development agreements we've done, is that there be a local hiring program, so that and that's really with the construction part of it, to at least advertise and reach out to, in certain ways to the local community in terms of for those jobs. So that's a requirement from the development agreement. I could pull it up if you would like.
If you can go ahead and pull it up. My questions, though, are what are you going to do here as far as that and taking it outside of just where we're at with what our requirement? What are you going to do to ensure that during construction we do have?
Well, it's a requirement in our contracts that we do the same. So our development agreement becomes an exhibit to our contracts. It's anything that we contract for. We have a local hiring process that we need to follow per the development agreement. So our contracts with our contractors will have the same.
And does that entail anything around like a racial equity statement and plan to ensure that the jobs that come are equitable to folks who may not necessarily have an opportunity to get into construction trades?
Yeah, it's typically most of the MIMBY, WIMBYs, women-owned, minority-owned, those type of businesses are all part of that contractual. Correct.
Okay. All
Correct.
right. Have you had any discussions with local labor around project labor agreements?
They haven't contacted me yet, but I'm expecting that phone call depending on when this comes out.
Project labor agreement. Well, it would be great to see proactive, a developer
We
really.
don't sign project labor agreements anywhere in the country.
You haven't.
We do not.
And is there any possibility that
We
that
do
would-
not.
Nothing around that.
The reason why we don't is because we're in 30 states, in 60 different jurisdictions, and all jurisdictions are different. As soon as you sign a labor agreement, you're beholden across the country, and we do not sign labor agreements.
Will you have any kind of, I think I heard something in regards to workforce development opportunity. I don't know if that came from you or some other comment I heard.
I didn't.
Okay, so will there be any kind of like workforce development opportunity here where you guys are going to be promoting apprentice trainings, jobs, anything to that degree?
We have very few employees on this property, so it wouldn't be from us. It would have to be from our tenants or our contractors.
I'm talking about in the development phase.
So it'd be our contractors.
So nothing you guys would do or be
We haven't in the past.
supportive of. All right. When I'm going to switch a little bit here on getting into some other things. So I'm going to probably think I saw in the tree plan there's I can't even read my writing now. A London, what was that? London plane tree. What is that, and where's that from? Is that a local tree? I mean, is that something from our?
I think it's a type of sycamore.
But is it native? It is. It's not native. It isn't, is it? But it's not.
It works really well in urban environments, and it's pretty hardy.
Yeah.
And it works great as a parking lot tree. Right, Cheryl?
And then as far as the landscaping palette, saw a lot of this is, pretty drought tolerant. How native are you guys willing to go with that? Would you be willing to go 100% native in your palette?
I'm sure we probably could.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, our landscape architect has had a combination of uses. I mean, there won't be any turfs. It's all going to be artificial. So drought tolerance. From the tree perspective, I think what's been specified is fairly drought tolerant. That's been our charge to our landscape architect.
Most of the trees that qualify as natives are oak trees. They would meet our shading requirements. So we have tried to stay away from using oaks as meeting the shade requirements, since we struggle with trees meeting shade requirements, period. Oaks grow very slowly.
Sure.
And don't make very good parking lot trees.
That I totally understand. I'm not really asking in that sense. I'm more thinking of like more of the other landscaping that's going to be throughout, making sure that we have pollinators and we're doing our best to contribute to other things that we can help to improve the environment on. All right. I think that's, well, I guess, again, we had some comments about the consistency with Reimagine Russell, and you got to that a little bit. Is this like what they're proposing as far as these plans, really?
Yes. There are different sections of Russell Boulevard, of course, within that corridor plan, and they were looked at in that way because they serve different functions. For this portion of it, which is the main part of the city, it went through that process, and in the plan, it identified basically a protected bike lane on that north side, partly because, of course, the university has the multi-use path on the south side that provides that off-street function, and there's issues with the right-of-way and what can be provided. That was my understanding. Well, I was not directly a part of it, but this is consistent with it, yeah.
And my last question, again, to you guys, to staff. Has there been any, and then this little, it's related, but kind of not, so Greg, shut me down if you want.
Remember, our issue here, or our mission is design review.
I know. Has the city done anything around a nexus study for a commercial linkage fee?
I think the short answer is no.
Yeah, and this was something brought up back in Cravoza days. I remember sitting there talking with him about this back in that day, and it just doesn't seem, I think, again, that's why I say missed opportunities, because this would have, even though there's not going to be residential as part of this component, if we had this commercial linkage fee set, there could have been some mitigation towards, at least in some kind of contribution to a housing trust fund. So, all right, thanks.
Thank you.
I don't know if this addresses the question you asked, Eric or Daryl, but in the ordinance that adopted the DA, there is a section on prevailing wage. It's on page 28 and 29 of the DA. It has a lot of legalese in it, but it basically says the developer agrees to fully comply with prevailing wage laws. So I don't know if that helps.
Which we agree to, but that's different than a labor agreement.
Right. Thank you. Commissioner Neville.
Thank you, Chair Rowe. I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to all of you who provided the public comments that you did today, for taking the time and being so thoughtful, including some of them which offered us some really, really helpful instructions on how to go forward here. I share the disappointment that many of you expressed about the lack of housing in the current plan. And I'm not suggesting that a return to version 1 of the plan is or should be the way to go. I understand how problematic that was in terms of the specifics of the housing that it provided. I want to step through a few questions that I have, and I do need, Chair Rowe, just to go back for a moment to our charge here, which I understand that we are doing a design review, and I know how much discretion we do and don't have in that context. We can't compel you to build housing, even though some of us might like to be able to give that directive. But asking you to go back and rethink isn't or shouldn't be off the table as a possibility tonight. I really appreciate the questions that Commissioner Valencia asked about you, because those questions have been troubling me all day. I needed to understand what happened between August 2020 and today to get us from where we were then to here with no housing. And I appreciate your answers. I mean, it's clearly timing, economics, and some other things that you described. But I want to ask you about a couple of the things that you said. If I heard you correctly, you said that your tenants, as in your retail tenants, they don't like housing. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
It's not that they don't like housing.
Okay.
We have housing developments on our properties around the country, three or four of those. Mm-hmm. They like to have their customers on property longer, frankly. The challenge you run into in a vertically integrated, my comments were related to the vertically integrated and the operational concerns with that. So everybody has to come to the ground, whether it's a car or people or product or whatever the case is. So when you have it vertically stacked, they're all fighting for the same ground floor plane. And operationally, it's much more impactful to retailers down low to have all of those different functional uses coming down on a very small site. This is a very small site for a multiple use development, frankly. So at the time we were doing the mix of use in the stack, the tenant base was something totally different than what we have today. As soon as we took off the additional uses above, if they were side by side, it would be easy. They would do it in a heartbeat. But the fact that they're on top, and this site isn't big enough to do side by side and still get the density to underwrite the expense, frankly. But as soon as you have them on top, all of that everything has to come back to the ground. And when you come back to the ground, you're all fighting for the same space. And operationally, the tenants, the national tenants that are signing up for our project now wouldn't think about it in a vertical stack.
So you said also, if I understood you correctly, you mentioned that, and I'm not sure I heard you correctly, you said further horizontal development could potentially include housing? I don't understand how that
Yeah, so
would
our
work.
DEA has another 13 years plus or minus on it, and it allows us to add additional density in the future in a horizontal plane. So retail comes down, this retail comes down to the ground. We have parking lots along Anderson. We've been talking with the ARCO folks. We've been talking with the apartment folks behind. There's opportunities to expand retail along an Anderson frontage instead of a Russell frontage sometime in the future.
So I'm sorry, I'm just not following. Where would the housing go?
It would go right along Anderson Road. Is it
And it
road or
would be
boulevard?
just one-story housing? Is that what you're suggesting?
No,
It would all be.
It would
no?
be a stack.
Okay, I
Yeah.
see.
It could be a higher density. I think I have it laid out at one point of around 200 units.
Okay. Did you see all of the public comments
I
that we
have.
received? And I'm curious about your thoughts about one that we received from an architect who proposed a way of some work that could be done now that could potentially serve as the base for residential development later.
So that's as far as overbuilding the structure, I believe, is that
Yes,
comment.
yes.
So there's two things going on this property. First of all, we have the geotech now, which we didn't have almost 3 years ago. The geotech report tells us that we need to over-X this site 3 feet in order to get a single story out of the ground, which means we have to take out 3 feet of the entire site and recompact 3 feet because the soils aren't suitable. If we went to an overbuild of the structure, we would have to probably put in deep soil foundations, so we'd have piles or caissons or some sort of deep foundations, and frankly, it would be too cost prohibitive in a single level to get up there. And then you'd have a podium deck built as the roof, so that in the future could support above. So you're basically raising the base shear off the ground to the first level, which structurally is pretty cost prohibitive.
Okay. I appreciate that. I thought it sounded like a great solution. I was so excited to see
Yeah,
that.
the only people that really
So-
overbuild is really parking decks because it's all out of concrete and it's
Yeah.
all coming up, so it's only a little bit more where they could add a couple extra floors. This is 3 different product types all in a stack, so you have, in order to park it as well, you'd have to build probably structured parking in one of those parking lots as well in order to support that.
Got it. I understand what you're talking about. My old office was across from where the Golden One Arena is, so I know what happens when you're building down, so you can do that sport. You mentioned traffic mitigation through off-site improvements. Were you just referring there to the improvements in the bike paths?
Yeah.
Is that what you meant?
Yes.
And so the question related to some of the bike paths is, why can't some or all of the bike paths become protected as opposed to just striped? Because that is a really heavily trafficked, biked area. I see near misses
As
all
far
the
as bringing
time.
them inboard,
I'm sure I don't know what you
inboard
mean by
of
that.
the
You mean-
curb,
I'm sorry, I'm not
Would that
familiar
make it
with. I'm just
protected?
familiar with protected
No,
bike
I
lanes.
think she's
with-
referring to Anderson Road and also Sycamore because they currently are just bike lanes, and the protected would be like the bollards or some other
Bollards.
feature. And
yeah, so the car can't hit you or doesn't hit
I
you.
didn't design them. I was told what I had to do.
Okay.
So I'll just lay that out there on the table because that can be a huge improvement in safety, and that is a really heavily biked area. Just a couple of questions for staff. I want to be sure that I understand what, if any, obligations the city might have, given that we have submitted our revised housing element to California Housing and Community Development. And in that plan, we indicate the proposal to develop X number of housing units at this location. If we approve this agenda item tonight, that will no longer be a correct fact. Do we have to pull our housing element and revise it?
We didn't count this site.
We didn't count it toward our RENA numbers. It's
No.
just in there as a possible proposed development.
Yep.
Okay, just clarifying that. And then my last question has to do with the findings that you have in our packet, and I think we'll get to that in deliberations. But I just want to be clear in that I think it's really important for us to look very carefully at the findings that we are making in support of this decision tonight, and want to be sure that's a part of our deliberations. So. Okay, very good. I haven't been on Planning Commission long enough, but that's so important to me. Those are all my questions for right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, what's the total cost of this project? What do you project it's going to cost?
46 to 47 million.
46, 47. Okay. You've already gotten to one of the questions I was going to ask, because the geotechnical report that was done in December does lay out the fact that the soils on the site have expansion potential and poor support characteristics for pavements when compacted as engineered fill. And it goes on to some other findings about the soil conditions, and it would seem to verify what you said, that the geotech report, if you were to do a one story of residential and then 3 to 4 stories of residential above it, you're driving piles. Which
Definitely have to dry piles. The 3 foot over X is going to be a soil mix, so instead of bringing in a lot of new import and export out, we're going to soil mix it to make sure that we have compactability.
Okay, I think so back in May of 2020, this Planning Commission unanimously rejected the proposal for 622 apartment units with almost 900 beds exclusively designated for students. City Council reversed that decision on a 3-2 vote and went ahead with it. After that, did you only seek a developer who'd be willing to develop that type of housing, or like a student-oriented rent-by-the-bed housing project, or were you also looking at somebody who might be willing to do conventional?
Yeah, we talked
family?
market rate early. It was 262 beds, I think, not 662, but that's okay. Yeah. But 894 beds, it all came down to the economic model of what can underwrite the expense. It got to, when we priced it in June and then priced it again in November, it went from a $160 million investment to 210. So it was really blowing up. I mean, as you know, construction costs have gone up 30% annually for the last couple of years. Even in that time, during 2020, it was elevated. And so the number of beds, the market rate wasn't working from an economic model because you had to drive a certain amount of revenue per bed. Whether that was 1 door, 1 bed, or 1 door, 4 beds, it was all based upon how much you could underwrite from an expense perspective. And in today's economic, time, with interest rates now at 5 prime going to 6 prime, the spreads are even tighter between what the valuation is versus what the cost of capital is. So, respectfully, we could pause and go back and look, but if you do that, time could take the tenants out of the mix as cost of money goes up or the economic circumstance changes. We all listened to Powell, or some of us listened to Powell yesterday, and just kind of go, okay, this is not good for what's coming. And we really believe we're at the end of this economic cycle, and we have tenants' commitment. So now's the time to drive this project forward.
I have no further questions. At this point, we would like to receive public comments.
Ro, can I just ask a couple more little small, I
Sure,
forgot
go
to ask. I'm looking at the site plan, and on the Russell frontage between tenant 12, 13, and 14, there's a trash site that opens up to Russell. I'm wondering if something couldn't be done.
It's enclosed. It's an interior, so it'll look like part of the building. That's one of the areas where we're showing murals and art, so it doesn't look like
It doesn't have doors out then.
It will have a door out, but it'll be a closed door. I mean, it's an interior space. It's not a typical swinging gates with a dumpster that rolls
Gotcha.
out.
Okay, that was my question. And on the Anderson Road side, there is high wire utility, and the trees along there look pretty suffered for it as a result of the old PG&E haircut. What happens with those utilities along the side when you're improving the site?
The primary distributions were not undergrounding. The secondaries that come in off of those poles will be underground to our site.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any recorded public comments?
Thank you all for your comments.
Thank you.
We do. We have 6.
Hello, this is Luana Villanueva. I fully support the retail-only project that the Brixmor developers have proposed for the University Mall redevelopment. The city desperately needs the tax revenue that it will generate, and the residents need the convenient retail shopping opportunities that it will offer. Any housing must not be connected to this retail. The city needs to advocate for much higher density housing to be built by UCD for their students. The mixed-use, high-density housing with retail on the lower portion just will not work with parking and other significant impacts to the local neighborhood. Again, I fully support retail-only development for the University Mall. Thank you.
Hello, I'm calling to support the University Mall Davis Collection proposal. My name is Lorna Berman, and I'm urging the members of the Planning Commission to support the current proposal by Brexel. I live about half a mile from University Mall behind Cesar Chavez Elementary School. I'm writing to support Brixmor's proposal to develop University Mall as a retail-only project. This decision works best for our neighborhood because it would not have the complications of intense traffic gridlock, inadequate parking, and all the construction delays that a mega dorm project would entail. Despite only a few retailers left at University Mall, finding parking can still be challenging. Also, with planning delays, the City of Davis is also missing out on tax revenue that could have been collected sooner had the retail option or retail-only option been accepted years earlier. I recognize that we have a housing crunch in Davis and that each year UC Davis accepts an increasing number of students, creating a frantic scramble to locate a place to live near the campus. That said, the City of Davis needs to put the responsibility of meeting student housing needs firmly where it belongs, on UC Davis. The City of Davis needs to push for higher density buildings on campus. Instead of a 7-story building at University Mall, why not a 7-story or more campus buildings instead of a mere 4-story student housing project like the new Orchard Park? Unlike UC Davis, all the other UCs have agreed to building at least 50% on-campus housing to relieve pressure on their surrounding communities. As the UC with the largest acreage, UC Davis is fully capable of building denser on-campus housing, but has not been given enough pressure to do so. With 71% of UCD students forced to live off campus, they compete with Davis families and workers who are hard-pressed to find places to live in Davis. UC Davis needs to follow the example of other UCs and build higher density on-campus housing. I encourage you to accept Brixmor's current University Mall Davis Collection proposal to develop University Mall as a retail-only project. The design is attractive and is sensitive to the needs of our neighborhood and to the city of Davis. Sincerely, Lorna Berman, Davis resident. Thank you.
Hello, Planning Commission. My name is Nancy Sweet. I'm a resident of Davis. I wish to speak on item 5A, the University Mall redevelopment. I'm calling in support of the retail-only option design that was presented by Brixmor and for the University Mall. We in the area have been waiting for quite some time for redeveloped retail in the mall, and it's very much needed. I urge that you move the project along, please, and support the proposal as proposed by Brixmor, and not delay any further in discussing other options. One look around the Russell Boulevard area around 113 all the way over to LaRue shows that many student housing projects have been recently completed in the area. I think it's time to move forward with the retail option and not delay it any further. I believe the area has stepped up quite a bit in terms of student housing in the last couple of years, and it would be wonderful to have some redeveloped retail as soon as we could. Thank you so much. Bye.
Hi, this is Alan Hirsch commenting on the redevelopment of the University Mall. I know there's a lot of discussion this evening of what should be built there, and certainly I would like the most housing there. My comment is more focused on the trees, as I, as the All Lorax, do, and I hope you have my slides up this evening. If not, they should be made available to the public immediately as required of the Brown Act, my slides. Because there are pictures, and only take the pictures. I'm quite concerned that the plan seems to ignore all the work we've done on the urban forest management plan. We can't even take baby steps forward, administrative steps, easy administrative steps that could happen around enforcement, the shade requirement of parking lots, shading of pedestrian areas, and the mitigation for tree cutting. So next slide, please. Page 5, if you have it in front of you, look at the diagram of the trees in the parking lot. This is what they're proposing. This is not 50% shade. This is the conceptual floor plan. This is not acceptable. This doesn't meet city code. This is actually illegal to be approved. If you turn to the next page, so on page 6 on that slide, this is the actual landscape plan. Again, this is not 50% shade over the tree areas. And if you look at the building on the north, you will notice that there's almost no shade placed in front of those buildings. And there's no shade in the area in the central area there. There's no shade here. Is this compatible with the cap? I don't understand how this can be approved. This is being fought forward at this point. This does not meet any requirement of the city for shade. Next slide, slide 4, page 15. Look at this, page 15 in the brochure you have. You see, this, the X's are all the trees that are going to be cut. Now, these trees should have been very large trees at the time, but they have all been died. A lot of them were replaced because the landlord, the previous landlord who was supposed to maintain these trees to get over 20 years, should be large, but he let them die. He let them be stunted by the lack of water. Well, we're rewarding them now because each one of these trees requires a mitigation. Because the trees are small, there's no mitigation fee or minimal mitigation fee. So the plan seems to reward the landlord developer for neglected trees because there's no enforcement. And next slide, slide 5. Compliant with the DISC project, we had a development agreement where the landlord was required to hire an arborist every 3 years and 3 years to monitor the trees to make sure they were being maintained to standards. That's where we're going to get around this thing. But we're not doing that. Even though the DISC development in the DA had it there, we're not putting this on this requirement. I don't understand why we're backsliding on development agreements to protect our trees. Again, we've been working for years now on developing a better urban forestry plan. We've been planning and planning and planning. Let's put some of this stuff into work. We know how this can be done. We need to move forward. It's been years. We've been working on the tree ordinance for 16, 17 years. Still no progress. We need to move ahead. This project should not be approved unless better trees are part of it. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Daniel Berman, and I want to call in a comment for the Planning Commission regarding the Brixmor retail-only proposal. Okay, anyway, dear Planning Commissioners, I support the retail-only proposal of Brixmor's proposed Davis Collection commercial redevelopment for the University Mall site. I oppose a previous mega dorm proposal that would have triggered congestion and other significant negative impacts at the site. The City of Davis really needs the sales tax revenue and shopping opportunities which have been absent there for over 5 years now. Instead of the City of Davis locating high-density housing at University Mall, UC Davis should step up and provide on-campus housing for their students, faculty, and staff. UCD also needs to build the proposed faculty and staff housing at West Village, which has been reserved for that purpose. UCD has a huge campus of over 5,300 acres and a 900-acre core campus, but recently they have been building only low-density student housing of 3 or 4 stories, with a rare 5-story building. The City of Davis should encourage UCD to build 7-story residential buildings on campus, starting with the Solano Park project being planned for redevelopment now. The new Orchard Park on-campus housing is only 4 stories high, and it should have been at least 7 stories high, like the private student housing projects across Russell Boulevard. All of the other UCs are building at least 50% on campus student housing, except for UCD, and there's no excuse for that. The redevelopment of University Mall has been delayed long enough. The developers originally intended for the UC Mall to be a retail-only development, which is what the Davis community needs. Now is the time to move forward with the Davis Collection project. Sincerely yours, Dan Berman. 1103 Maple Lane, Davis. Bye.
Martha Teeter, calling for Planning Commission item A, the public hearing. Our housing element highlights one strategy is to build housing in conjunction with existing malls. The University Mall Davis Collection redevelopment was an ideal site for such housing. It is across the street from the university and has access to many types of public transportation. Thus, it satisfies the criterion not only for providing the housing we desperately need, but also for reducing the effects of climate change caused by transportation. The omission of the residential and parking component of the University Mall renovation is definitely a problem for Davis. It is critical that the city, including planning and the Planning Commission, be proactive to support developers in finding housing construction partners and in supporting such a project by incentives and negotiations. Funding the Housing Trust Fund might have been one way to do this, and it still might be in the future. Davis needs to increase housing density using spaces such as this. Housing needs to be built at all income levels, especially affordable housing. This is a sorry loss for the community of Davis.
That concludes our recorded public comment.
Thank you, Victor. So we'll now open it for in-person public comments. You are limited to 3 minutes, and there will be a countdown of green, yellow, red that will indicate how close you are getting to the end of your time. If there is anybody who is representing an organization and you want to speak on behalf of a whole group of people, you may want to indicate that to us. What we've done in the past is then allocate up to 5 minutes if you're going to be speaking on behalf of another whole group of people. That could expedite things a little bit. So I see people lined up. Sir, please step forward.
Thank you. I'm David McLaughlin. I've lived here now for about 35 years. And when I first came to Davis, one of the first places I went was the University Mall. And I remember enjoying the Good Earth restaurant there. It was quite a delight, and I enjoyed going there many times. And I would like to see that same opportunity again with this development. There is a real need for tax revenue into the city, and all of the developments so far with the student housing is being really subsidized by the residents here in Davis, and this is an opportunity to try to balance that out. Thank you.
Hi, Gaina Lambang, and I'm going to kind of talk about some of the things we've already discussed, but I wanted to really reinforce it. And I do think that the Davis collection looks really nice. I saw it when you came to town, and it looks great. It doesn't have a whole ton of parking, which is kind of hard for some people, but in the long run, that's probably for the best. We should stop using our cars all the time. There's a lot of good public transportation around there, so that's really nice. But yes, like maybe not the majority, but many people have said, ideally this should have had some housing on it, and it's just such a shame. It should have had affordable housing on it. I think maybe we got stuck on the idea of a mega dorm, and that bothered people. Anyway, ideally that's what should have happened, but it didn't. I don't think it's going to. But what I want to reinforce to all of you folks and everybody who's listening to me is that we need to keep thinking about putting housing with retail space somehow. And downtown does have some mixed housing. It's housing and retail, and it looks good. And just think about all the cities that have been built that had both, Boston, whatever. This can happen. I think you're well aware of this, but I'm going to mention it, that we have a horrible problem with housing. We have students and community members that literally can't find a place to live. When I was younger, I couldn't have afforded $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. It's absurd. The people that are going to get the jobs there, they won't be able to live there. So in the meanwhile, I just want to have a little positive idea to throw out in general, that we request that people that build retail going forward donate some money to the Housing Trust Fund. I mean, it's not like a requirement, but just really try to push that. And I want to respectfully ask Mr. Brown and your company to consider that, if nothing else. Because, and then I think you all know this, but I'm going to remind everybody, a housing trust fund can provide down payment assistance, repair and maintain affordable housing, provide rental vouchers, purchase land for affordable housing, and build affordable housing. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next comment.
Hi, my name is Ellen Kalark. I'm the co-chair of the Interfaith Housing Justice Davis, but this is a personal statement. I think we can all acknowledge that there is insufficient housing in the reach of both low and moderate income families in our town. This is an issue which impacts our own adult children starting out on their professional careers. They can't afford to buy in. But it's also a significant justice issue as we've locked out low-income persons, a group which is disproportionately of color. The Brixmor project was an opportunity to build more housing for low or moderate income people. Others may share proposals which may, even at this late date, increase housing opportunities at this site. And I'm still hoping that some rabbit will be pulled out of a box and maybe we can make that happen. But I think we also need to ask the city what it might have done and what it must do for future mixed-use projects to help affordable and moderate income housing pencil out. I recognize that others have alluded to some of my concerns, but I'd like to raise again these questions. Why was Brixmor unable to find an affordable housing partner? Were our demands too inflexible? Are regulations too cumbersome? Are fees too high? Would subsidies from a functional housing trust fund have tipped the balance to housing? Would flexibility regarding the kind of housing offered have made a difference? My understanding is that the city asked for student housing. Could they have found a partner for low-income housing or moderate market rate housing? It's all housing. At this point, I'm satisfied with any of those. How can the city proactively manage the concerns of the immediate neighbors to minimize local pushback? I know that was an issue. I still hope that housing will be a part of the Brixmor development, but at the very least, I would like the council to learn from this missed opportunity and to start prepare now for the next project proposal with more ideas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Commissioners, Davis City staff, and to the Brixmor guests that have joined us tonight. My name is Judy Yanis, and I'm commenting on the University Mall project. I am a current member and former chair of Social Services Commission, which is charged with reviewing affordable housing here in our city. Tonight, I'm here speaking as a resident of West Davis and as a parent for DJUSD. I'm invested in this town, as are all of the many people who have lined up here tonight to speak to you. I'm also here to present you with a letter co-authored by a group of neighbors and signed by 60 members of our community who all want to see a better outcome for this project. As you all know, and as many of us have already said, we're in the midst of an affordable housing crisis with record high home prices and low vacancy rates for renters. We're also in the midst of a climate emergency, generations in the making. For years, we've underutilized our land, shortchanged our housing, and allowed our CO2 emissions to run unchecked. The City of Davis falls far below our required units based on RHNA. Single-story, sprawling commercial developments with no housing at all are not a solution to our problems. The best use of this land is mixed use, housing included, multi-story, and green. Please revise this plan to incorporate housing as the top priority and explore the full set of options that could increase the housing stock here in Davis. For example, the city could negotiate substantial contributions to the Housing Trust Fund. Many cities also handle these type of contributions via commercial linkage fees, which came up tonight, and I appreciate that question. I personally think that would be a worthy addition to the inclusionary zoning ordinance that's coming up for revision in the coming months. For all the talk the last 2 years of prioritizing infill, this project should be at the top of the list. Without building housings on locations like this one, we will not come close to closing our affordable housing gap and meet our community's needs. Tonight, I heard from our Brixmor guests say that they would consider phasing residential in, and I was delighted to hear that. So my question to all of you tonight and to the city staff is, how can we get that into a guarantee? What is the process to make that happen? Housing along Anderson would meet a lot of the feedback you've heard tonight, wouldn't it? So let's dig in to that opening that they shared tonight and see what's possible. Developments like this last for decades, as the one we have right now shows us. Please reconsider this plan to meet our housing needs as the top priority and make sure that we make responsible design choices to address our climate. I believe in a bright future for Davis, an inclusive future, a climate-resilient future with diversified, affordable housing that ensures our community will thrive. But we have to build that future together. And with your help, this project could be a step in the right direction. So please, thank you for your attention and consideration, and I'll leave the letter in paper copy because it has more signatures now for your review. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is John Castelfranco, and I live on 7th Street. And I'm here representing the Task Force on Housing and Homelessness of the Davis United Methodist Church. Thank you for the opportunity to comment this evening. We are disappointed that in the midst of an unprecedented housing crisis, plans for redeveloping the University Mall site contain no new housing. The University Mall site is ideal for infill housing development. Its location makes it a convenient place for university faculty, staff, and students to live. While University Mall residents will save commute time, the rest of us will get less greenhouse gases and less traffic. Housing at University Mall should include units affordable to students and moderate and low-income families who work nearby. While the primary responsibility to provide student housing lies with the university itself, Davis must also play its part. Students report that they've had to camp overnight in front of leasing offices in the sometimes unsuccessful attempt to find housing. UCD is a public land-grant university tasked with equipping the next generation with skills to address the challenges and opportunities facing our state. We should not let the high cost of housing restrict enrollment to children of the wealthy. 4.5 million Californians must use over 50% of their income for rent. This makes it hard for them to afford other necessities and puts them at risk of homelessness in the event of a job loss or illness. Strong steps must be taken to obtain the affordable housing we need. The city should provide incentives to the Brixmor developers to encourage them to restore housing to their University Mall development. Moving forward, the city should adopt policies to make affordable infill housing development a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. The speaker, next please.
Hello, Commissioners. I am Carol Hillhouse. I'm co-author of the letter that Judy Ennis referred to, but these are personal statements or comments. I care about the site and its future. As a resident of West Davis, I pass this site every time I head to main campus or downtown. I have been a client of the businesses there for decades. Also, for 33 years, I have worked on campus just to the south of University Mall at the UC Davis Student Farm. My work there has been with and for UC Davis students. I understand them and care about their well-being. They are our collective future. And this site, well designed, could improve the quality of life for many. For these reasons, I am very familiar with and invested in your decisions tonight. First and foremost, the plan should be in alignment with what we currently know about smart new development, the current ideals that can be implemented to move a community into a better future. I attended Brixmor's public comment session held in January, and I was disappointed. Aside from the frustration that Brixmor had stepped back from the mixed-use plan that integrated much-needed housing with commerce on this site, their commerce-only plan showed little awareness of Davis or the concerns of our times. What I saw was a facelift to the original strip mall idea. Strip malls were perhaps forgivable in the 80s, but are completely inappropriate today in what is currently the center of a college town that purports to be moving towards climate-friendly practices, and as well as often claiming the title of bicycle capital of the world. Not the place for a new single-story strip mall. I'll make two specific points on design for your review. First, traffic flow for cyclists and pedestrians has not been seriously addressed. Cyclists need more than just bike racks. Bike paths need to be integrated into business area with safe, bike-friendly flow. If paths remain on the periphery, cyclists simply will roll on by. As is, cyclists and pedestrians are not invited to move across the significant parking lot to get to the businesses. I recommend the businesses be moved closer to Russell to reduce or eliminate the parking lot gap, and that bike entry be better addressed. Second point, Central Community Plaza that is proposed is oriented to the south and with no clear plan for cover. If you live in this area, as Linda Deos mentioned, you know that that will bake for several hours of the day during many months here. Even if new trees are planted there, they will have a hard go of it because of the heat generated and held by the buildings and the pavement in the south-oriented space. If the businesses are moved closer to Russell, that gathering space could be reimagined and integrated with the existing mature trees. This could be part of an inviting bike and walker-friendly entry. There are better options. Thank you very much for considering.
Thank you.
Hello, Planning Commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to comment here. My name is Julia Schreiber, and I've lived in Davis for 19 years as a student, as a young teacher, and now. Many of my friends and colleagues are moving out of Davis because housing is unaffordable here. I have students who have moved to Woodland and Sacramento and are now commuting to school because it's too expensive to live here and go to college. Not to mention the students who are living in their cars, as was mentioned in the parking lot, and others who are camping outside. 15 years ago, I had neighbors who lived downtown and worked at Ace Hardware. No longer. It's unaffordable to have a working class job and live in Davis. It was mentioned in the Q&A with commissioners that there are transient users of parking and students commuting, and this is a symptom of the housing crisis that we have. Brixmor states that they create shopping centers that uniquely connect with local culture, character, and needs in much of their advertising. I frankly see little in this plan that addresses our community's needs, or culture, or character. We need forward-thinking, well-designed, affordable housing and commercial real estate that addresses transportation and our climate crisis in a thoughtful, community-oriented way. Brixmoor's plan doesn't address our community's needs, so I suggest, if it's not possible to reject it, to do major design upgrades. Please hold Brixmoor accountable to what they say they do and prioritize our community's needs over the interest of outside investors. At the minimum, I urge the Commission to push for the original development to be centered around people, pedestrians, and bicycles. The development as it is designed around cars. Cars and parking should be de-emphasized and moved to the back of the commercial buildings, ideally into a parking structure to minimize the footprint of cars and the heat island effect of parking lots. To make room for housing, and to make room for housing in the future. This development should be pedestrian and bicycle friendly, meaning cars and bikes shouldn't mix. Anyone who bikes in Davis knows that adding bike racks and painting a stripe on the street doesn't make something bicycle friendly. There's more to it. Access to businesses and housing should be designed for people not driving, so put the cars in the back and make entryway into the development safe for people and for bikes. Forward-thinking development would place solar panels on the roof of a parking structure and over parking spaces to increase energy efficiency and provide shade. It's going to be 120 degrees here in the summer in the future. And when we're no longer driving everywhere, we're going to need shade and pathways to access these spaces. As planning commissioners, I know you're aware, running out of time.
Yep.
That this is
Time's up.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Jonathan London. I'm a longtime Davis resident and a professor of community development at UC Davis. I'm just speaking as an individual here tonight. I'm here to urge you to reject this short-sighted and retail-only project and set up a true process to work collaboratively with the developer, if they're willing, and the community to create a project with both affordable housing and retail that contributes to Davis as a sustainable, prosperous, healthy, and equitable community. I have to say, when I saw those pictures of a really old school strip mall, my heart sank. And I want to ask you all, what happened to your heart when you watched and look at those pictures? Did you get excited? Did you have a sense like, yes, this is what I want for my community? Or was there disappointment? And I ask you to follow your heart. I want you to do the right thing because you're the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission. Your job is not to put a stamp of approval on what is to follow the status quo. Your job is to promote what could be and should be aligned with the values of this community, our beloved community. I think we can all agree that our aspiration for Davis is not another strip mall. It's not to feed the endless cycle of consumption towards ecological and social ruin. It's to promote the health and well-being of all of its residents and its environment. Your hands are not tied. You can be champions of the community. A university plaza, and I won't use the word mall, let's call it the University Community Plaza, that includes both retail and affordable housing, will create inclusive and sustainable communities. This is a place for local workers to live near their jobs and reduce vehicle miles traveled. It's a place for students who are currently commuting long distances, in some cases living in their cars, to have a high-quality experience. There's a lot of research that shows what does it take to have this kind of beloved community and is not this kind of development. So I urge you to reject this proposal, return it back to City Council, allow us to do a reset and think through what would really allow all of these different ideas that have been discussed today to happen. Brixmoor says in their environmental and social governance report that their mission is to be the center of the communities they serve. And so think about that. What could the University Community Plaza be as the center of the communities that they serve? So let's provide an opportunity to let Brixmoor live up to that motto and live up to your responsibility as a planning commission to create a community that we all believe in. 7 years is a long time to wait, but think about 70 years of the wrong project. Think about the legacy that you want to leave. Thank you so much.
Good evening. First of all, thank you for your service. Late nights, I see. I'm Catherine Keller. I'm a resident of Davis, the mother of 4 college graduates, and I'm pretty sure maybe the bad guy in the room right now. But I do thank you for taking my comments. I fully support the retail-only project at this location, and I hope you will as well. For many years, the University Mall was my go-to shopping center, and I would love to see something akin to the World Market, Forever 21, maybe even an escape room or something that would be attractive to our teens, restaurants and other retail that could be enjoyed by the wide range of folks living in Davis, including the students of all ages. As a nearby resident of the U Mall, I also fully support this retail-only proposal as the most environmentally conscious and traffic safe for the many people who already transverse those intersections. And I did hear your concerns about the, more pedestrians, more bikes. I think if it was mixed use, we certainly would have that. The scope of this project is also in keeping with the neighborhoods nearby. The Davis Collection retains nearby parking for Trader Joe's shoppers as well as those visiting the collection of stores proposed. When imagining retail within the community, I support a structure that takes into account the diverse population of Davis, children, parents, students, folks working and retired, those who can walk and bike, and those who can't. I do appreciate that Brixmor is working with the Davis Business Association and the City Council regarding this project's impacts. As I did mention, we have 4 grown children, all who attended college and needed housing during those years. Our younger daughter lived in a garage for the last 2 years of her college, and it was still very expensive. So I am sympathetic to the housing shortage of UC Davis students. Fortunately, UC Davis is one of the largest landholding campuses in California. It is the most convenient and logical place for additional student housing. I understand the university may need to be pushed to fulfill its commitments in that area, and I can intend to continue my pushing. UC Davis is in the unique position to build not only conveniently placed housing, but to moderate rents as needed for students' wide range of income levels. At the 2x2x2 meeting regarding housing in November, I made this point directly with Chancellor May, and I hope other student housing advocates are doing the same.
Your 3
Tonight, my
minutes are
support
up.
is for retail. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Rao and Planning Commissioners. I'm John Keller, resident of Davis and former UCD student. I recommend the Planning Commission accept the proposed retail-only development so that the ghost of the U Mall can be brought back to life. You might recall the Grad as a large music, burger, and youth entertainment venue, which left 4 years ago. You surely recall World Market as a source for furniture, gifts, toys, food, and more. These businesses served the whole community and generated local tax revenue. This is the second time Brixmor has proposed a retail-only project, and I think it's time to get it done. Housing is important to everyone here, but I do not support adding it to this site. Some might say this is a perfect location, but I say housing on UCD's side of the street is more perfect. UCD has the responsibility to build more housing. Sure, they've built some, but nothing like what is needed. Nothing like what many UC campuses already have. In fact, UC Davis is at the bottom of the list of housing built for students. Not middle of the pack, but the bottom. UCD is excellent in many dimensions, but not this. At the state level, there is special money for UC housing. UC Davis has acres of land. With money and space, why shouldn't UCD excel in providing housing for students? Brixmor has a chance to excel when they attract tenants to this new facility. Trader Joe's appeals to a broad diversity of customers: younger, older, workers, walkers, drivers, close by folks, visitors from out of town. Brixmor can attract a similar diversity to form an ongoing, stable base of customers for successful new businesses. Approval of Brixmor's proposal, I think, improves the prospects for community shopping. I support that balanced approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm Barbara Kletter, and I'm commenting on the University Mall, the redevelopment. Davis needs more housing. By not growing, Davis becomes more and more segregated by class and race. It is unjust to limit development that prevents those from working and studying here from being able to live here. My religious faith calls me to work to make Davis more just and more inclusive by building housing wherever we can. I am saddened and disheartened that with a business-only University Mall redevelopment, the city loses a huge opportunity to build more housing. Our current housing element counted on the 264 units that were previously planned for this redevelopment and now seemingly will not be built. How can the city of Davis prevent golden opportunities like this from slipping away in the future? What can we learn about why Brixmor could not keep its housing partner? Was it inflationary building costs or community hostility? Let's find out and work to change those conditions. Please keep this severe need for housing uppermost as you work with residents and City Council on an updated general plan. Thank you for your work and your devotion to our city.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Vera Sandronsky. I'm a Davis resident. I'm commenting on the University Mall project, and I am co-chair of Interfaith Housing Justice Davis, but I'm here as an individual. So I echo many of the comments that have already been made. I will just note that I am very distressed that there is no housing that looks like will be part of this project. I want to live in a community that can support young families and people from diverse backgrounds who often aren't able to afford to live here. And I also know that we have a very big problem with declining school enrollment, which is related to, very directly related to the fact that young families can't afford to buy here. So the quality of life that many of us have enjoyed and our children have had will be very hard to repeat in future generations unless we are able to make some really big changes in affordable housing in our community. I heard questions posed to the developer. I heard responses. I am not coming away fully satisfied. I think we need to do a very deep, honest examination of all the players in this story, which include the developer, the city, and quite frankly, the community, and different views community members have about what they want and what they think is appropriate. I think we have to be very honest and look at ourselves in order to go forward effectively and figure out how to fashion a different outcome when there are new opportunities ahead of us. And I just want to close by saying that I too would really welcome a significant contribution to the Housing Trust Fund from the developer as a measure of goodwill towards supporting affordable housing in our community going forward, and another type of investment in the community. Thank you for your time and for your work on these difficult issues.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for affording me the opportunity to speak. My name is Mark Huising. I am a faculty on campus. I live in Davis. I have been a resident of California for 17 years. I've called Davis my home for 8. I'm raising 3 kids here. I speak on behalf of myself and my family. I call Davis home, and I've watched this process unfold with some interest. As you can probably tell from my accent, I wasn't born in the U.S. I've actually had the privilege of growing up in Europe, in the Netherlands. And the Netherlands now is known for many of the things that Davis aspires to be: bike-friendly, supportive, community-focused. Well, the Netherlands that I was born in 45 years ago wasn't quite the Netherlands you all think it is. It was a car-centric, quite unsafe traffic-wise community that was not built. It looked nothing like the community that you would visit now when you go there. I've been away from the Netherlands for almost 2 decades. Every time I return to visit my family, what I thought was really good traffic infrastructure, affordable housing, inclusive community, it improved. It continues to improve. And how does it improve? It improves by every time that local politicians and civilians who do the hard work that you guys are doing here, every time there is an opportunity like this, you seize it. 57 years. 57 years before this particular site will come up again. So when an opportunity of 57 years comes along, you don't pass up on it. You find a way to make it happen. I've heard really, really good comments from folks, some of whose professional job is to actually think deeply about this. We have such wonderful expertise in our community. People are willing to step to the plate and kind of think along. And yet we did not succeed in getting that expertise in a plan like this to take advantage of this opportunity. I don't think I heard a single person say that we're anti-development or anti-commercial. I also heard people say, well, UC Davis should do more. Sure, they do, and I work there. I agree. I have the privilege of being able to afford in this country because I have a full tenured position. Most of my students and junior faculty colleagues cannot. And that's a problem because, and it's only going to get worse if we are not able to succeed in passing up and following these opportunities. I have 30 seconds left, and I'll close by making a remark on something that was said that bothers me. Mr. Brown evoked his daughter and his wife when he talked about whether he considered a particular site safe. If his family would consider it safe, he would consider it safe. It bothers me that I hear city staff describe some lines of paint on a asphalt as protected bike lanes, because I can tell you they're not. If it doesn't have a physical barrier to actually prevent cars from encroaching on families biking.
Excuse me, your time is up.
I thank you for your time. Have a wonderful evening.
My name is Sam Mandel. I'm an undergrad at UC Davis. If it sounds like I'm having a panic attack, it's probably because I am. So, not yet. So, just to clarify, there is no current plans to overbuild, correct? There's no plan to overbuild, i.e., to put the to put the big structures in the ground to facilitate further vertical growth. Sorry. Yeah, there's no. Right. Sorry about that. I can't ask questions, I guess. I didn't know that rule. So, good. Given that vertical building is likely the future of the University Mall, if we restrict that to one story, it doesn't matter how LEED certified a building is. If your plan is to tear it down in 15 years, when you go, oh, well, now we need the housing, and now we have the zoning for it, it doesn't matter. The damage is already done. So I guess what I'm asking is, maybe we should demand better. This is a very short-sighted solution for an antiquated. This is an antiquated solution to an age-old problem of how do you deliver market goods to your community. And the strip mall was a solution. It is not the current accepted solution. It is not what this community will tolerate. Please demand better. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Eileen Sametz. I'm a former planning commissioner, for those of you that may not know, and I served on the Housing Element Steering Committee right after the general plan update, and also I've been working on a lot of land use issues over the years. So I'm in strong support of the Brixmor University redevelopment project. it's exactly what Davis needs. It's what works there. It's what makes the most sense for many reasons. The project will not create the impacts that the former proposal would. Everything from traffic, circulation, and inadequate parking was a huge issue. Because one thing you need to understand is that when you try to put, especially vertical housing on top of a retail place, there's a problem with trying to control the parking. I mean, how do you prevent the residential from raiding the parking? So it's not an easy thing to manage. So it really, most retail, owners, and I interviewed quite a few at one time on a retail issue years ago, I asked about this, and they said they were not supportive of having housing above their stores because they said it's going to be a chronic problem with trying to protect their parking from being raided by the residential. If you think about it, it's not just the people living there. It's their friends, it's, whoever, or else, other people visiting and whatever. So it's, how do you control that? Because what the retail owners, what they rely on is having convenient parking that they have access to. So if that's going to be a big competition, people aren't going to want to go there to shop. So it's kind of like doesn't always work. In inner cities, it can work because you've got good transit, but frankly, Davis does not have good transit. It has very minimal transit. And it's mostly, planned around the university. So the bottom line is the city also desperately needs the shopping convenience and the sales tax that we've lost for over 5 years. So this is something that we should be grateful, if anything, that this group is willing to come in and work on redeveloping this project, which is going to cost them an enormous amount of money. They've already looked at the residential component idea. It doesn't work, and so we should respect that and move forward. And for people that want more housing, especially the people who have spoken tonight, and particularly the UCD professor who teaches sustainable planning, they should be advocating for UCD to put housing on campus. And finally, regarding the climate change, the retail-only project is the environmentally superior option in the EIR, so it is the best for the environment as well. Thank you.
Are there any more public commenters? With that, we are going to close. Jerry?
I would like to make a clarification if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Is your mic on?
I think so. Doesn't it? Okay.
You just need to.
I need to get closer. Commissioner Neville, I need to owe you an apology. I think I misunderstood your question or it just wasn't clicking right. The answer to your question is we did count the units in our prospective list of rezones and other projects that we might need to perform in order to meet our RENA requirement. However, that doesn't mean that the applicant can't come in and do this project because the use is a permitted use. And so what we will then have to do is make up those units somewhere else in the city when we are looking at the rezone as a whole.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification because I thought that was the case, and it was troubling to me that we would have submitted the housing element as it was if we were to make this decision tonight. But it sounds like we don't have to pull it back, but we do have to make it up. We have to make up that loss.
We're basically under a no net loss rule right now.
Okay.
So we have, when we do all the rezones, which we will be working on later this year, we will identify the number of units that have to be built on each of those individual sites that we're going to be rezoning, and then we'll be quote unquote stuck with that unless we make up a rezone somewhere else in the city.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. We are going to take a quick break.
Thank you.
We've been sitting here 2 hours and 25 minutes. Try to make it back at 9:30, 5-minute break, and we will continue. Thank you. I am going to take the liberty of calling Mr. Brown to the microphone to address some of the comments that were made by the public. One of the suggestions that was made both orally and in writing was to move the orientation of the shopping center south so that it fronts on Russell. I'm wondering what your reaction is or comments on that from a design standpoint.
It's been our experience in our development of our shopping centers that customers want convenient, safe access. We move it to Russell, the entrances will be facing north, and you'll have a blank wall on Russell, frankly, because there won't be any storefronts there because the tenants will require the parking to be adjacent to their front doors. We all know what's going on with theft and store theft and that kind of thing. So dual entries is not an option for most of our retailers. Sometimes you get them into patios for restaurants, but you're not going to really get that in a bulk. And frankly, between Trader Joe's and Arco is the smallest area possible. We've already filled a third of that without parcels, the smaller buildings. So we would end up losing density, which may make the project infeasible because of you wouldn't have enough density to support the development.
The project has been going on since 2016. When discussions were initiated between the city and Brixmor, and your initial desire of the company was to do a retail project, and then the city staff at that time, I don't think they're here anymore, came back and said, well, why don't we add 4 floors of student housing? There's been tonight urging that the city and Brixmor re-enter negotiations or discussions about adding housing to the project, given that it's been going on for 7 years and the mall is closed and is really not producing any significant amount of sales tax revenue. How do you respond to that, if you care to do so, to that kind of suggestion if the city were to make that kind of decision?
Well, it's interesting to say that some of the commissioners aren't here. I wasn't here in 2016 either. I actually joined the company in 2017. And so it's all about time. We have an entitlement right now for 262 units and 136,000 feet of retail. So we don't have a requirement for that. We have an entitlement for that. We still don't have a residential partner to go alongside of us. So we'd have to look through that as we get through this next year, or 9 months, whatever, of disruption in 2023. It's the uncertainty of what it looks like. By the time we get through any opening up of the box, if you will, and figuring out how to restack that, who's still there? Are our retailers still there, the retailers that are committed to us today? Are residential people there? We don't know what will happen. So I think it would, I heard all the comments and I certainly appreciate that. I just don't think it's, I'm very concerned that there won't be any investment in the site if we go back and try to push more of our entitlement in the initial phase.
Yes, my third question is, there had been suggestions made in writing and tonight that Brixmor make a financial contribution to the city's housing trust fund. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I heard significant. I don't know what that number looks like. Is it $5 or is it $50 or is it $50,000 or is it $100? I mean, and I don't want to appear to be buying a vote either. We're not opposed to contributing to our communities. We do it all the time. It's not a requirement of what we do. It's a by right development that we're proposing. But it's something that I would entertain if required.
Before we start our deliberations, do any other commissioners have any questions of the Brixmor representatives?
Well, I have a real concern for the trees, and not all the trees internally in the project, but there are, I think it's 3 or 4 cork oak on Russell, and in between them are 2 really fabulous pine trees. And we keep talking about, the southern orientation, no shade, blah, blah, blah. Well, these are on the very edge of the site. And there are some pine trees along Sycamore also that are really fabulous, healthy trees. It seems a shame, honestly, to take those trees down. Your thoughts on that?
I believe can you call up the kill the tree plan? Sorry, I didn't know what else to call it.
Yeah. Save the tree plan.
Totally fair. I know Russell, for the mature trees along Russell, for the most part, are being maintained. We walked it today, and we're putting in we're putting in a new sidewalk. As a matter of fact, I think we've turned into a meandering sidewalk, right, Eric? Because to miss the root balls, although a lot of those roots are lifted over the years, so we're still, yeah. So you can see there are a few trees on both sides that are being maintained. There's certainly trees along Russell that are being maintained. The two that are being taken out are, I think, we're actually on the arborist report as being diseased. Go ahead.
I don't think so. I think they're.
Can you? I just wanted to know if you could see it.
I've got my own.
Oh, okay.
That's also where the bus shelter's going, frankly.
Great place to have trees. Nice and cool.
Understand, but in order to put in a 9x14 bus shelter, there's soil disruption to that. We have 3 bus shelters to install: Sycamore, Russell, and Anderson.
Maybe the arborist can work with you somehow on that. I mean, I'm not a professional at this. Cheryl, you've got some background. Maybe you have some thoughts on it. But I just think it would be really nice if you could consider keeping these mature, beautiful trees. Anyways, that's one thought. And I will also echo what some of the comments were this evening, and Chair Rowe. We are struggling as a city to put together resources into our Housing Trust Fund. And, as I said earlier this evening, it's not your problem to fix our housing issue. I get that. But on the other hand, as other people have said, if there's some goodwill that could be demonstrated, it might go a long ways just as goodwill.
Appreciate that.
Chair Rowe, I just wanted to follow up, if I could, on
Please.
several of the questions that you had. So this kind of piggybacks on what Chair Rowe was just asking you, and when he asked you about the Housing Trust Fund. And I understand that as of today, you are under no obligation to make a contribution to a Housing Trust Fund. I also know, because of the way things are structured right now, we actually can't require you to make such a contribution. And what I heard you say was you would only do so if you were required to do so. So that's where we are.
Not necessarily. I would be willing to contribute $50,000 to the Housing Trust Fund. I don't know if that's a nominal amount and if that's an offensive amount, but that's what I'd be willing to but I don't want to appear to be buying a vote. I really don't. I'm just saying, if in good faith.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know what significant number is, honestly, so that's why I know you're not.
Yeah, and then I'll come back. Go ahead, and I'll.
I was just going to say that if there was a proper commercial linkage fee in place, right? Like back in, whenever the Kings Arena was built, they contributed $800,000 into the City of Sacramento's Affordable Housing Fund. That was based off of what they were required to do, not necessarily out of the goodness of their heart. The $50,000 may not go far, but keep that. I'm going to keep that in mind, because we are going to have to run a campaign around a housing trust fund to get some kind of permanent source passed, and we're going to that would have support a campaign. Wouldn't do much as far as moving a trust fund today, other than maybe helping pay for city staff. But just, file that away, because I'm sure many of us are going to.
No, thank you. And I just have one more follow-up
related to your earlier question. So because we're at a little bit of a fork in the road here, where in terms of what we do tonight, we go down the design review path, we start to focus in on the details like we're doing, and that's maybe where we are. But a couple of Chair Rose questions, we're looking at this sort of what are the other options? What can we do? And I want to just be sure I'm hearing correctly. It sounds to me that at this point, you don't feel that it would be feasible to kind of go back and reconsider the project. I'm hearing that it isn't feasible for you from a business perspective to commit to us tonight. Okay, I'll go back. I'll rethink whether there's some reasonable amount of housing I can provide. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that is definitely what I have heard in response to all of your questions. And so
I honestly believe that we've given it all due diligence to get to this point tonight. And I believe we have the appropriate, given the economic time we're in and the investment that our company's willing to make, I believe that we've done all of our due diligence. It's the appropriate execution of this plan.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
I won't keep pushing on that at the moment, so thank you.
I believe Commissioner Weiss has a question.
Yeah, can we just go back to the other little opening that you gave us on the Anderson and Arco potential? What would have to fall in place? I understand the apartment complex, but what would either the economic conditions need to be, what would it need to look like so that became a reality? We all got excited when we heard it, and then we want to be realistic.
The Arco owner is a business owner. He owns 3 gas stations. He has asked for a big number, which we've agreed to, but he wants to operate for 10 years because he has 10-year gas leases. It would be some sort of development that would have to come into place that could underwrite the expense of obviously buying the Arco station.
And the other apartment complex, I thought on.
Yeah, we've just started conversations. I actually just met him for the first time, and we were talking about what kind of collaboration and partnership we can have. So nothing has been discussed as far as redeveloping his site, but it's just something that, as you get the partnership of your adjacency, sometimes you can
People
make other things can happen.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do any other commissioners have any questions for Mr. Brown?
No, I'd like to move on to our deliberations and finish our night off. I would also like to remind everyone, too, remember that council has given us go ahead to, things don't sit right. We don't have to approve. This is design review. If we don't like the design and the review of it, we don't have to approve it.
That's certainly the case.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown, thank you very much. So we will start our deliberations. As a reminder, we have 3 separate staff recommendations on page 1 of the staff report that will require motions. But to start our deliberations, I will start to my far right, with Commissioner Neville.
Having a little trouble with my mic here. Thank you. So do you just want my comments on the first of the 3 motions? Is that your...
or whichever direction you want to go.
Okay. All my comments. Okay, all my comments. So on the first staff recommendation, I had one question. Sorry, I just have one comment or question. The EIR, no, take it back. I don't. It's on the mitigation. So I would actually move the staff recommendation on 1A to approve. I actually don't have any comments or considerations. I mean, that analysis is completely consistent with what I would expect. And the EIR is sufficient. So, and I agree there's no further review needed.
So we have a motion to approve item 1A. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Discussion on that motion to approve item 1A on the staff report.
I think 1A is kind of like the low-hanging fruit here. This was something that we had gone over extensively back in the day and had housing as a component of it. There are a lot of...
This is it.
There, yeah. There it is. I remember that. Yeah. But I don't see that being, the biggest challenge that we're addressing tonight. So as far as that goes, I don't, I think 1A is.
Are we prepared to
If you
take
want, but I'm not ready to go through the rest. Okay.
Are we prepared to take a vote on 1A? Starting to my left with Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
Commissioner Valencia.
Yes.
Commissioner Essex.
Yes.
Commissioner Weiss. Commissioner Rutherford.
Yes.
Commissioner Neville.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Great. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
I forgot to vote. Yes. I was ready to move on. So, Commissioner Neville, I think you still have the floor here.
Wow. Okay. We're going to. So on 1B, the mitigation and monitoring, again, it's fairly similar, but there were a couple of differences in your monitoring and reporting program. And the only question that I had pertained to, it's kind of just a minor thing, maybe not minor, but it had to do with the timing for the delivery trucks. The original provisions in the mitigation and monitoring report were stricken, and I didn't know why.
Yeah, I think initially we didn't have the details of when the delivery trucks would be arriving, and so now that the project has been, there's more detail on the project and the design, and talking to the applicant, we understand when they're able to limit the arrival of the trucks. So before it was not limited.
Can you go to that
that's-
page for a second?
Yeah. Do you have the page number?
I don't have it. I'm sorry.
Okay. Kanoy, I think it's. Am I on right now? That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. There's always a lot of pages sometimes. Yeah. If do you want to? Do you want to jump in? Or? Wait, that you're
So
even
it
here?
looked like any restrictions had been removed, and it wasn't clear to me if there were any restrictions because they were all stricken.
Biological.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. While I pull it.
I can
We're
help
gonna
out
have
if
Nick-
that's okay.
thanks. Sure.
Yeah, we're going to have Nick Papani answer.
Thank you.
Good evening. Nick Papani with Rainey. Pleasure to be here. Chair and Commission. So the noise analysis that was prepared by our consultant for this environmental consistency analysis, they determined that with an 8-foot wall, the noise levels at the property line would be acceptable for the delivery trucks, and there would not need to be a limit on the hours as was originally set forth. I would say, though, that the applicant has stated that the hours for delivery would be limited, I think, from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. So they're kind of self-limiting, but with that wall, there's no requirement for certain restrictions.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you. That was my only concern about the mitigation and monitoring. I didn't have any other further concerns. Want me to just keep
Okay.
going, or you want to go around? Oh, wow,
Yep.
okay.
Keep
All right.
going around. Mr. Rutherford.
Oh.
No, she still has.
Oh, you got more.
Oh, I
okay.
don't have more on mitigation and monitoring. Oh, okay. Yeah, so on the design, okay. So now we're going to get into the design. We're going to do the whole piece.
Crux of the thing.
Okay. Okay, so there's a number of issues, and I share the same concerns that have been raised earlier about the shade in the sort of that area in the flip-flop thing, that whatever we're calling it. I share the concern about that, and I want to know that's one issue, is a concern about that. I do want to ask also, in terms of the design, we saw some slides earlier about the trees, and I just want to ask a few questions. Some of the assertions made in the public comment were that the tree plan is inconsistent with the city ordinance regarding trees. Can you address some of those concerns?
Sure. The city ordinance requires that parking lot areas be shaded 50% at, say, by the trees at 15 years after their planting, and the tree shading plan that they provide meets that. I don't know if some of the concern is that there are portions of the site, portions of the parking areas that maybe those portions are not 50%, but it is looked at collectively. So there might be areas that are shaded more than 50%, other areas less than 50%. I'm not sure if that was the concern, where like some areas being less shaded because in the backside, where the delivery areas are, there are parking spaces, there are fewer tree wells. It is a busier area with the trucks, so that might have been some of the concern in that back portion. But on the tree shading plan, they do provide the 50% required.
So your view is that the proposal meets the tree ordinance and it satisfies the city's requirements,
yes,
in your view. And then the other concern that I also raised earlier related to protected bike paths, I do still have a concern about that. I know the bollards aren't perfect, but they can make a huge difference. And that is such a problematic area, not just Anderson, but also Russell, and then that stretch between Sycamore and Anderson as well. And if there is a way to do bollards or something that makes it safer, and I'm not an expert in bike path design, but that struck me as not being very improved over what we have now. And what we have now is not very safe. So in my sense, based on what I observe and when I ride there.
We're having a conference going on.
We can move along because I don't have further questions about design. If we want to move along while they think about that.
You guys want to ruminate on that and we can move on a little bit?
Yeah.
All I can say is this, in addition to what Greg is going to say. We did work with Public Works, who has the responsibility and assignment of designing the right-of-way improvements. And as Eric said, the plan is consistent with the Russell Boulevard plan, which has already been through the process. Mm-hmm. So I don't. Are you talking about the kind of those plastic bollards?
Well, so again, I'm not the expert in exactly what's going to make things safer. I just know what I see and experience on a regular basis in that area, and the bike safety is a real concern for me.
Okay. The one, so you're not.
And some of it is people simply not actually knowing where they should go and what they need to do if they're trying to make a turn. I see that all the time, and I don't know what we can do to improve that. But if there's something we can do, we should be doing it. So.
Okay. Go ahead, Greg, if you think.
Yeah, good evening. Greg Behrens from Fair and Peers. We helped with the environmental impact analysis, focused on the transportation section. This is something we did look at. And today on Russell, there are no bikeway accommodations. There's no designated space for bicyclists. And that was something that we identify as an issue and an underlying factor and a significant impact for bicycle facilities. And so part of what's being proposed would be installing a dedicated bicycle facility along the project site frontage on Russell in a way that would be consistent with both city design standards as well as what was identified in the Russell corridor plan. So there's consistency there in terms of that comprehensive planning process and with the design standards that are in place for all the bikeways throughout the city.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're getting rid of the parking too, right?
Yeah, that'd be part of it, would be reallocating that space that's
So-
currently on-street parking into a bikeway facility.
They won't
That's what I
be
thought.
next to the cars or anymore or
Yeah,
anything like
that was another concern. I could see that was gone.
So
Yeah.
I think there actually is going to be a lot more space to work with than what we have today.
Okay, good. I'm going to move along. So.
Mr. Rutherford, you have the floor.
Thank you. Of course, you guys know I'm kind of be very disappointed in the direction this has gone. Also disappointed in a lot of the comments that we've heard and the fear-mongering that continues to go on in this town over housing and pointing fingers at UC Davis. I don't think UC Davis caused our housing crisis. I want everybody to remember when you're pointing a finger at someone, 3 are pointing back at you. So here we are with this project of a strip mall, which I thought strip malls were dead, and yet this is like the savior now of our community. One thing I don't think that made it in tonight's comments was about the greenhouse gas emissions, that the jobs that this project is going to create. If a quarter of the new 250 jobs involves a commute to places like Woodland, it would generate 200 tons of greenhouse gases per year. That I think causes concern, especially with the way that this project is designed and being brought to us. I think what caused a lot of fear with Brixmor was again the negative comments brought to the community. Again, it's the whole megadorm thing and such. I mean, come on, we could have had some different conversation around the housing instead of just outright denying it and saying that it's, again, pushing this message that I don't think is valid anymore. We weren't going to approve, quote unquote, a megadorm. We made it very clear years ago that those aren't the types of projects we want to see. I got to tell you, I miss having my headphones in Zoom because I could always play music in the background, and I got to tell you, the Grateful Dead kept me calm over the last few years, and I'm really, really missing that right now. Yes, please. Terrapin Station, if you can. I'm sorry, but that's the benefit of Zoom. You could have the music in the background while everything was going on. So I guess quickly, can you define design review? What does design review mean?
Basically, you are looking at the architecture, the site plan, the landscaping, the design of the parking lot, that kind of thing.
Okay.
The physical improvements on the site and not the uses of the site.
Not the uses, but so far we've heard, we don't like the parking, we don't like the siding, we want to see it flipped, maybe have things done backwards. I'm not seeing a lot of things that, to me, even the use without the use doesn't sit right with us. I don't know how this project in and of itself is going to be our savior. People weren't happy with the businesses that were there years ago. They failed for a reason. Other commercial is failing for a reason in our community. I don't know how just putting, some lipstick and dressing up a new project is really going to change the way things are going as far as retail. I don't know what has changed in our economy to make people think that this project itself is going to be the savior. Yeah, those are my comments. Oh, and I don't like the landscape palette. If I have to address something in that plan, I just don't like it. I want to give Alan Hirsch an award for his unique, thoughtful, and entertaining presentations. City Council needs to think up something to give our Lorax, if nothing else, for his great presentations. So I'll yield.
Thank you, Daryl. Commissioner Weiss?
Yeah, if this was a different time, like maybe the 1960s, I would be like cheering this on. I'd be like, yes, great. I mean, this have a nice, bright, car-centric strip mall. Yeah, let's go. But it's it's a little hard to really want to cheer on this redevelopment effort, just given the fact that we're in a housing and climate crisis. So, that being said, I understand where we are, and I'm a pragmatist. So let's just move on ahead. I mean, like most people, I just had hoped we could do better. And, you know, morally, I'd feel like we could want to do better. And I know everybody, when they looked at this, went, oh, darn. You know, we all had these ideas in our heads. But again, I'm a pragmatist. I'm all about following the money. I understand where the investment's coming from. I understand we need sales tax. I get where we're going. That being said, I'd like to suggest the following in terms of the findings. And this might be a little bit touchy-feely, but I'm going to go for it anyway. The very first statement in the findings says, the proposed project conforms to the general plan as consistent with the objectives of the general plan and zoning. I don't think it's consistent with the objectives of the general plan. I'd say that, you know, I think it's fine if we'd say the proposed project conforms to the general plan and zoning, the general plan and zoning. Because if you look at the general plan, and I know we still need to update our general plan, blah, 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 the general plan vision is all about striving to be a community where basic human needs are met. And certainly having an affordable place to live is a basic need. So I just would like to suggest that, you know, we have that removed. So we just say the proposed project conforms to the general plan and zoning, full stop. To me, it does not consistent with the objectives, because in our objectives for our general plan, that's what we say. I looked it up and I went to it. Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
Well, I don't mean to talk out of turn, and I actually thought we were going to come back to the findings, and I was going to make.
I'm sorry. I
no,
thought
no,
we
no.
were
It's
discussing
great. I was going to
number
make a
2.
similar sort of. I had a similar concern about the consistency finding, but Sherry, it's required. We have to make that finding, correct? We have to make that finding in order to support a decision to approve.
That it's consistent with the objectives?
I don't think so. I think, Sherry,
You have to make the finding that it's consistent with the general plan.
We can't say that it conforms with, no, it consistent, the consistency. The proposed project conforms to the general plan. Conforms.
And is consistent.
Right. Well, it's virtually impossible for every project to be consistent with every single policy that's in that document. But generally what you're saying is it is consistent with the general plan. Now, if you're trying to call out something that it's not consistent with, that seems a little counterintuitive.
I'm not saying that it's not consistent. I'm just saying I wouldn't say consistent with the objectives. Because the objectives of the general plan is we have all these highfalutin things that we put in there, and this isn't.
Well, how can you say it's not meeting the objectives and it's consistent with the plan?
It's consistent with, and it conforms to what we have. I didn't say it was consistent. I just say
Well, the
getting rid of
finding
word
is
objective.
consistency, though.
Okay. And again, I thought that we were talking about number 2 here, which is about the findings and the conditions of approval, are we not?
We're discussing, in general, the project, but I would point out that the City Council in December of 2020 approved the general plan amendment for this project as mixed use. They amended the general plan line use amendment. This is the ordinance they adopted in December 15th, 2020, to create the new designation of mixed use, which allows for a combination of residential and non-residential uses in the same zone. And it goes on and on with a lot of whereases. So I mean, I don't know what is wrong with the verbiage that says is consistent with the objectives of the general plan, because it would seem the verbiage that's in the findings, in fact, does conform with the resolution number 20.199 adopted by the City Council in December of 2020.
That's fine. I'm just giving, a comment and all, but I just want to make sure we're in the part to talk about findings. Or am I only just supposed to be talking about
We're talking about the
design?
project in general.
Okay.
So you're good.
Okay. I just want to stay in order. Okay, thank you so much. All right. Also, under the conditions of approval, it says that the applicant is encouraged to consult with the city's civics arts manager And I would like to say that they must consult with the city's civics arts manager, and then I would really want the city's civics arts manager to consult with some kind of citizens commission and come up with something that's very much uniquely Davis and done by local artists, and something small to just make it less generic, and maybe something that's a little bit more like Davis. And I was very happy to hear that there was going to be some kind of sculpture in here and not just a mural on the wall would be good. And then the other condition of approval I'd like to put in here would be something that our Lorax asked for, which was the monitoring of the tree plan afterwards. Like after we're done with this, do we go back?
That's in the development agreement.
That's in the DA, not in the COA.
Yeah. So they have to do it anyway.
Okay. Thank you. You can move off of me.
No further comments? Okay, Commissioner Essex.
Thank you, Chair Rowe. I want to thank Donna Neville for her very insightful comment about the housing element. Super helpful. Thank you. Thank you. And I want to just check with staff about on page 9 of the staff report. In the project analysis, we're talking about the general plan and zoning consistency. And I'm looking at this paragraph, the intent of the mixed-use land use is to provide sustainable and transit-oriented opportunities for medium and large-scale multi-story mixed-use development that integrates retail uses and it goes on and on. Where does this language come from? Because that sounds a little bit different than what Chair Rowe just mentioned was in the City Council resolution that adopted the mixed-use zoning.
They did two things. In August of 2020, Council adopted a resolution expressing their intent to adopt the mixed-use designation. Mm-hmm. But because state law limits, I believe, the number of times the city can amend its general plan to 4, they then batched that with a number of other general plan revisions in December of 2020. Mm-hmm. And that's where they basically memorialized what they had already said they were intending to do in August of that year.
So what's in the staff report is the description that we wrote for the mixed-use land use designation. I'm not exactly sure what Chair Rowe was reading from. Were you reading the whereases?
I am looking at resolution number 20.199. It was a resolution amending the general plan for this project, Russell Boulevard, also 1770 Research Drive and 2555 Research Park Drive. That was adopted on December 15, 2020. And then encompassed within that was the resolution that they had adopted dealing with this mixed use for this project.
And it's the whereases within that resolution that you're quoting.
Yeah, there's a number of whereases there.
So that's the difference.
So the inset paragraph that you have here in italics
is the general plan language.
Is the general plan language. Okay. So, I'm also having a really hard time with the findings. I'm having a really hard time with most of the findings, starting with this consistency to the general plan. If what we need to find is that this project is consistent with medium and large-scale multi-story mixed-use development that integrates retail uses and/or office and research and development related uses with higher density multifamily residential uses. So I understand we're doing design review, but we have to make these findings for design review, and part of it is the scale and the stories. And this seems to, it's hard to find, for me to agree that we're consistent with the general plan if this is the language that's presented. And number 2, neighborhood character. I have a problem with that finding as well. It says the scale of the buildings will be consistent with existing and anticipated surrounding development. We're not planning for more one-story buildings in this neighborhood. We're planning for multi-story dense development. It's happening all the way down on both sides of the street, right? Both sides of Russell Boulevard, multi-story, large-scale buildings. Architectural design is the third finding. I'm having a really hard time making that finding that, again, that the architectural design is compatible with the existing properties and anticipated future developments within the neighborhood in terms of such elements as height, mass, scale, and proportion. We just, 7-story building was built right down the street that came through the planning department. And at that time, I was like, really? We're going to approve a 7-story building on Russell Boulevard when we're still discussing whether it's appropriate downtown? But I'm really struggling with this from the design standpoint to make these findings. I worked in development early in my career. I've been on design teams for at least a dozen shopping centers between 1985 and 2000, and I worked on so many projects that look exactly like this. They look exactly like this. And so to make these findings that the design is what we want to see for future designs is, it would be painful to me to make this make these findings. I just don't see how it can be done. I'm really struggling with that.
Any other comments? Okay. Commissioner Valencia.
Maybe I'm looking at this too superficially, I don't know, but I agree with the comments that Commissioner shall I say, going blank here, it's getting late, made with regards to the civic arts manager. I think it shouldn't be encouraged, it should be require. No big deal. I think the developer would probably be happy to go along with that. There is one thing I would like to throw out, and that is, I think it's called Parking Lane 11, which is up by the trees that I think are really important to the project on Russell. Seems kind of, what's the word, unnecessary perhaps. Taking those parking spots out and putting in perhaps a pollinator garden, I think would be really important to the site. I still think that we didn't get an answer on the trees, but I think the trees are really important to the project. Beyond that, and then maybe some notes to, our minutes tonight that just says that the developer has generously offered $50,000 for our housing trust fund. Those things would make me happy, And I would be comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with signing off on environmental determinations, item B, and approved planning application with the things that I just shared. So that's where I'm at.
Commissioner Diaz.
Thank you very much. I am new to this process, and I appreciate, hearing from everybody along the way on this. It's definitely been a learning curve for me in seeing kind of what these steps are and working with findings, et cetera, going forward. I have not changed my views as far as I'm concerned with the type of development that this is with regard to, is it really made for the weather that we're going towards? Is it really made for, or I should say the climate that we're going towards? I'm just amazed that we're building another strip mall. I mean, I just am amazed that that's what's proposed. And you're the expert. I'll just call you Mr. Brixmore. I'll elevate your title. And it's like, is there really nothing else out there that is a way for us to do retail now? I mean, I'm an Amazon shopper. I will admit that. I do that. I don't know if that would change if there were different things for me to go to and see. I mean, right now I live in a student town, and I recognize that, and that is going to cater to students and student clothing stores and student restaurants and student everything, apparently. But where's the vision? I mean, where is showing what Davis can be and where we want to go to? We talk about this all the time. And to see the same old is troubling to me. And yes, I'm very troubled that there's not the housing here. I would love to see that. I understand where you are saying and how the whole penciling out, yes or no. I mean, however you do that, I get that. But I'm just so concerned that this is the best that we've got. And I'm frankly as concerned that we need money and we need the sales tax dollars. And the pragmatism that Commissioner Weiss talked about, I definitely think that we have to always have that be a consideration at what we're looking at here. And that's why, and thank you, Sherry, for giving this some idea of what design review means. And I'm just struck that it just doesn't look like anything different than anywhere else around the country. And maybe it doesn't look any different because that's what everybody else wants around the country, or that's the most economical way to build something around the country. I don't know. But right now I'm still troubled with it. I have not made a final call where I'm going to come down on this. I'll leave it with that right now. And also, I'm sorry, I do want to say I do appreciate your offer to help us out with the Housing Trust Fund and whatever that means and however that comes out to be. I know that we can't require anything in that regard, and thank you on that.
Okay. I have a concern that we've been kicking this project around for 7 years. I don't know how Brixmore has the patience to have put up with our discussions about it this long in the city of Davis. I frankly think if I was a property owner, I would have probably thrown in the towel and walked away at this before now. I'm concerned that the longer we prolong this, according to an article that was published in the Davis Vanguard on May 28th, 2019, the project was projected to generate $650,000 a year in sales tax revenue for the city, and we desperately need that. And I'm concerned that the longer we put this off, we're just going to be continuing to put off the badly needed revenue and maybe lose the whole thing if the applicant were to decide to move away and just put a for sale sign in front of the property, which they're a business, and I think that's something that they have to, I guess, consider depending on what we decide to do tonight. I don't have a lot of concerns about the design. I know before we've had conversations in this commission where somebody said, well, this doesn't look like Davis, and my reaction is, I'm not sure there's actually an official Davis architecture anywhere. This company operates over 300 shopping centers around the country. I think they know what they're doing. They know what designs work in terms of pleasing the tenants, and that's ultimately their client or the tenants. With that, we do have some suggested motions. I've been taking notes on some things that people have offered as ideas they have on perhaps amending those motions. I would caution you that depending on what kind of amendments you want to make, there needs to be a logical nexus between that amendment and what the project is allowed under the current zoning and general plan. So with that, we have item 1B and number 2 that need to be acted on tonight. If anybody would like to proceed with making any motions.
I would move 1B.
We have a motion to adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, moved by Commissioner Neville, seconded by Commissioner Weiss. Are there any comments on that motion? I'll take a roll call vote, starting with Commissioner Diaz.
Aye.
Valencia?
Aye.
Essex?
Aye.
Yes.
Rutherford?
Aye.
Neville?
Yes.
I'm a yes. That motion passes. And now we need to deal with approve the planning application for the final plan development and design review based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval. Don't everybody act at once.
Well, I'll just throw it out there. I would. How do we phrase this? I do not approve planning application for the final plan development and design review for Davis Collection, la-di-da-di-da, based off of comments that we've heard. That's my motion.
That's your motion. Is there a second to that motion? I see and hear no second.
Yeah, give it a try, you know.
May I make a comment?
Of course.
I appreciate your motion and the reasons for making it, but after what I have heard here tonight, it sort of reminds me of the experience we all have when we're called up for jury duty and the judge is asking all the prospective jurors if they're going to apply the rule of law when it comes down to it. And there's always that one juror, and I'm not saying you're that one juror, but there's always that one juror who says, nope, I decide the way I want to decide. And I fear that a rejection tonight would look like that and would just go right up to council. It would be reversed on appeal, and that's where we would be, and it would just be a further delay. I feel, based on the discussions we've had and what we've heard from the applicant tonight, that a rejection is sort of a futile effort on our part. And that's why I didn't second it. Not that I don't support your thinking. So I would like to have a further discussion about the concerns about the finding of consistency, though.
May I, Chair Rowe?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, yeah, I'm just struggling tremendously with trying to make these findings that, to me, this project is inconsistent. You know, really considering the general plan designation and the failure to be consistent with the scale of existing and proposed developments nearby, it seems to me to be reasonable to request the applicant to return with, at a minimum, a phasing plan showing 262 residential units that are and a project similar in scale to adjacent developments to do two things: show no net loss per the housing element, because that's important to us, and to actually meet this general plan and zoning designation and the findings of neighborhood character, architectural design, plan development consistency. Yeah, those are the three. So the applicant had mentioned that they had looked at this, and certainly we saw earlier plans that were approved, which is why we're in this fix right now, is because the multifamily project was approved and the mixed-use development designation was applied to this project. And it can't be reversed without another general plan, it seems to me, without another general plan change. And if you can explain to me, Sherry, how we can do, I understand normally we could do part of the project, but this just seems inconsistent. I'm just saying.
I would say this. When you have the general plan and the zoning next to each other, and I'm going to talk in the philosophical for a minute, the general plan is a policy document, and it is supposed to be broad goals, objectives, and policies. It doesn't really implement anything in and of itself, and as Michelle found, there are times when it seems like it's saying one thing and then something that seems like it's completely contradictory to it, and yet somehow that's consistent. And the way that consistency gets rectified is through the implementation of the zoning ordinance. It's the zoning ordinance that implements the general plan. And in this particular instance, the general plan does say mixed use. It allows for all kinds of combinations of housing and residential and commercial together, separate on horizontal or vertical and all these kind of things. And it also goes on to say that the zoning is going to tell you how to do it, basically, to put it in layperson's terms.
Got it.
So in this particular instance, this project, from a design perspective, is consistent with the general plan because it is consistent with the zoning. And the only thing you are looking at is architecture, site plan, landscaping plans, those kinds of things. The use is off the table.
Yeah, and I can see that the use is off the table. That I can see.
Having the architect or the applicant come back with a design for housing does not put the use off the table.
So what about the scale issue? Because three out of the four...
I'm not following you or
findings.
Comment on the scale issue. What other projects do we have that are out of scale with this one?
Well, it seems like every project on Russell Boulevard now is larger in size and scale than this project, with the exception of Rite Aid.
I think all the projects that are immediately surrounding this particular project are consistent in size and scale to what they're proposing.
So a 7-story building and these large I don't understand from the standpoint of height and scale, most things along Russell Boulevard are larger than this. They're taller.
That's where I'm losing you. Aside from Davis Live, what else is there?
Well, there's every apartment complex along there.
Is taller than this?
Yeah.
I think what she is referring to, if I can interject, Cheryl, is the two recently completed UC-owned apartment complexes that are 4 stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how
well,
tall are these
there's
buildings?
3 stories, several 3 stories along there.
Okay, so they're above 3 or 4 stories, right? Probably right around 40 feet.
They're 4.
What? No.
No.
How tall is the building? Do you know how tall it is?
30.
Their building is 32 feet.
Right.
A 4-story apartment building is 40 feet. To me, that's consistent. We're not talking about a huge difference here.
Yeah. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to densify, we're trying to go up, we're trying to...
And we did that in the policy document, and we did that in the zoning standards, and he meets all of those. So what I think I hear you all struggling with is the policy document and the desire to have this wasn't crafted in such a way that it was narrow, that you must build commercial with the residential on the top. It's not written that way. So all you're being asked to look at tonight is the design.
Perhaps I can help clarify something here. There was an email that went out from the city from Jenny Tan a couple days ago in response to one of the written letters. It says, to help provide some context around the proposal and the city's role, here is information you find helpful. A property owner has the right to build or improve their property within the regulations of the local zoning code, which in this case allows retail only or mixed use. City staff have been in multiple conversations with the property owner regarding building a residential mixed-use project and to ascertain what, if any, city support would assist in bringing the housing portion of the project to fruition. Property owner at University Mall has consistently told the city that they will not build mixed use and they will pursue retail only. Here's the kicker. The city does not have the authority to force the property owner at University Mall to build mixed-use apartments or housing if they are proposing development that is within the current zoning requirements and standards. The zoning of the property allows retail use only with an option to include residential use, but does not mandate residential. There is no legal basis for the city to impose such a mandate. Current proposal by the property owner is for a design review of a retail project only. Planning Commission and the City Council only have the legal authority to act on the design of the proposed retail-only project and do not have the authority to deny the proposal due to a lack of a housing component.
But we can deny it if we don't like the design, if we don't like the siding, if we don't like the parking, if we don't like the lack of solar, if we don't like the pedestrian, if we don't like the bike paths, if we don't like, which I've heard a lot of tonight.
Sherry, would you concur with that statement?
As long as you can make the findings, yes.
So my admonition to my colleagues then is if you want to deny it on that purpose, then we should probably recess so you can write findings, or get together between now and April 22nd and come back with findings. And I can read you the definition of findings from the Guide to California Planning if you'd like, but those findings must be defensible in a court of law.
So, for example,
Rixmore has the legal right to sue if you adopt findings that don't have logical legal underpinning.
you would have to describe why the proposed architecture, site design, and landscaping are not suitable for the purposes of the building and the site and would not enhance the character of the neighborhood and community.
Are my colleagues prepared to write findings?
I'm going to just kind of jump in here for a moment, and this may make things worse, I don't know. But I've gone over and walked the site several times, and it is literally falling apart. It is an abomination right now. Anything, and I shouldn't say that, but what the developer is proposing to do doesn't get me excited, but that's personal opinion too. I'm not crazy about the color scheme, but that's personal opinion. I do think that this project that is being proposed is a very nice project. I will also share with you that if you go back and read the financial analysis that BAE did, it states in there pretty clearly. Now, it was pre-COVID, but take that into consideration. But I will say, I think we all know, and this financial analysis substantiates that we are, for the size of our community, very low on retail businesses. And not only are we very low on retail businesses, but we are very low on taxes as a result of having very, very little retail business. So I think that this proposal is meeting a lot of our needs and requirements. Does it make us happy with regards to the housing issue? I think we need to move on and look at this project and do something about what's before us tonight. So, okay, I will make a motion that we accept item 2, the way staff puts it together there, approved planning application 2250 for the final plan development design review with the following amendments. One is that the civics arts manager, it's not encouraged, but will work with the civic arts manager, and I'll leave it at that. That the trees on Russell, that the developer will work with the arborist to save the, I think they're Aleppo pines, the cork are already, but the Aleppo pines specifically on Russell, and to make a good effort to save the Aleppo pines that are along Sycamore. Notes in our meeting tonight stating that the developer is making a generous offer to donate $50,000 to the Housing Trust Fund.
We have a motion on the floor in a second. I feel incumbent upon me to ask the applicant if those changes that have been proposed by the maker of the motion are acceptable to you.
Ooh, we don't do that.
Certainly appreciate the
due process.
Appreciate the comments. We will use best efforts with the trees. Some of those root balls are raised as we get into. We'll work with the arborist on those trees, and I'm agreeing to the 50,000. And what was the third? I'm sorry.
Work with the Civics Art Commission.
We'll work with the art.
We'll be
commission.
required to contact and work with the Civics Art. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Just for clarification,
Sherry.
on the donation, we're not making that a condition, right?
No, it's noted.
The minutes.
Minutes,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, note
okay.
in the minutes. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Who's ever taking good notes, can you just read it through again with the amendments? I get the part that staff wrote, but the part with the amendments, I want to make sure we're clear on that.
You have that, Victor?
Yeah, and if you wish to, thank you.
That we're accepting item 2, recommendation by staff, approved planning application 22-50, with the conditions of that the developer is required to work with the city's civic arts manager, that the developer will do a good faith effort and work with the arborist to save the 2, I believe they're Aleppo pine trees on Russell Boulevard, and to make a good faith effort with the arborist to save the Aleppo pine trees along Sycamore.
Everybody understand?
That's it. Oh, and then the notes to the minutes on the developer making a generous offer of $50,000 for the Housing Trust Fund.
Any further discussion of the motion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. I will start with Commissioner Neville.
Aye.
Mr. Rutherford?
I abstain.
Commissioner Essex?
No.
Aye.
Commissioner Rios?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Thank you, everybody, for your discussion. That concludes item 5. I received a text message from Commissioner Streeter saying he left. Pardon?
Mr. Chair, did you get?
You want to revise your vote?
I'm sorry. We didn't get the vote. I've come up with 6.
We'll vote again.
So I missed somebody.
Neville was yes.
It's a yes.
I'm a no.
He's a no.
Okay, now you're a no? Okay.
Commissioner Weiss is a yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Essex is a no.
Okay.
Commissioner Valencia is yes.
Commissioner Valencia is yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Diaz? And I'm a yes.
Okay. You must have been the one I missed.
It's because once before I forgot to vote. He probably figured I forgot to vote again. I was being an airhead.
Okay.
So I received a text message from Commissioner Streeter saying he regretfully had to leave, so he will not be rejoining us. We will now go to number 6.